Synth Network.
Good evening, everyone. It is just gone 7 o'clock. Sorry, we're late. It's Friday, the 2nd of July. We're into the second half of the year already, and this is episode 65 of the Pro Synth Network show with myself, Ben Simpson, and Cryss Synthient. And today we are joined. I'm super excited about this one. We are joined by what I can only describe as an absolute hero of mine, and a man who's responsible for a great number of these things that are in this room behind me now. Mr. I'm going to get this pronounced right because I did ask before we came on air. Mr. Jeczalik, sorry, get that correct. Welcome, one and all. Hello.
Good evening.
Hello.
Hi, JJ. Hello. How are you?
Bit of a delay here.
Oh, right. Okay. Sorry about that.
No, not really. Sorry.
No.
Yeah, I'm very well. I'm glad to be here.
Excellent. Well, we're absolutely delighted to have you here. Really excited. And look, I've even worn a T-shirt in honour of your history.
Well, they're great shirts, though, I've got to say.
Yes, and indeed. And I have to say, you are responsible for a great deal of what goes on behind me. So we'll speak about that in great detail a little bit later on. But we'll come back to you very shortly. Let's just go to our my co-hosts. Sorry, I'm a bit cottonmouth. I'm a bit kind of starstruck at the moment. Ben Simpson up in the north of England. How are you?
I'll do. I'm all right. Yeah, not too bad. Like yourself, I'm a big fan of JJ's work, but unlike yourself, I wasn't really aware of just how much he'd been involved in. And as I've
it's crazy, isn't it?
Researching that, I'm like, wow, this guy's like had a hand in like nearly everything I like. It's like I'm just going to pick something at random and then find out he was involved in it, you know. And it's been quite mind-blowing, really, to see his level of involvement.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, we'll talk
impressive.
about hopefully a bunch of those things over the next hour or so. Cryss, how are you? Is it hot? I mean, that's a silly question, but how hot is it in California?
Very hot, very hot. Got the AC cranked here, and I'm feeling good. So just happy that we're all together today, and really look forward to the chat.
Actually, you've just reminded me. It is quite warm here in the UK. I've got my window open, but I haven't got my fan on. But I can do this now and go, Alexa, fan on.
Ha ha!
And there it starts.
Right.
Hopefully, just in the background. Hopefully, won't go over the mic here. But yes,
Robbie, before you go on, a bit later, make a note to ask me about Alexa.
Okay, will do. I did read something in
cracking story for you.
Oh, great! I did read something in the news today that a bunch of parents are taking Amazon either to court or they're doing something because they're all parents of people that are called Alexa, and apparently it's nothing to do with the use of the name. It's the fact that they get bullied at school because people keep going up to them and saying, Alexa this or Alexa that, and I thought, anyway. An odd thing, but yes, let's crack on here because I'm rambling. Let's just get the housekeeping bits out of the way. So, of course, if you haven't already, you can, of course, join our group on Facebook, which is Pro Synth Network, and we are the same moniker for Instagram and for Twitter, and of course I think most of you are watching on YouTube as well. You can email us at info@prosynthnetwork.com. We also have, as we spoke about last week, we've got this new page on Facebook exclusively for the show, so anything that's show related will be posted on there, and then you can share that stuff around and about, and we'd love it if you would, because it gets the word out there, and the word needs to get out there because we do like a little bit of funding, because you guys pay for us to be on here and do this stuff, so your donations make a real big difference, and you can do that by going to Cutly/PSN-donate, and as soon as we get to 1,000 subscribers, then hopefully you'll be able to donate straight through the YouTube chat as well. So that's a good reason to subscribe to our channel and like it, and hit the notification bell to be reminded of every show that we do, which is every Friday, and we do some in between as well. I'd also like to welcome anyone that has joined in the chat room or joined this stream for the first time who are Art of Noise fans. I know that we've been sort of throwing out messages across the interwebs the last week or so about this, so if you are new to the show, welcome. I hope you enjoy it, and maybe you'll stick around for a little while longer and see exactly what it is that we do. We generally talk about music technology, we cover some news items, we have some topical discussions about music technology and all its use, and look at that, the classic Art of Noise face. Oh, it's gone again. There he is. It's back. So yeah, we generally talk about music tech news. There's not been a huge amount of news this week, which is quite fortuitous, because I've got a bunch of questions that I want to ask JJ. I'm sure you all have too. And if you want to ask questions in the chat room, then please do throw them up there. And if you make sure you tag us at ProSynth Network or at Ben Simpson or at Synthient Sound, then at least one of us will be able to pick that out of the chat. But please bear with us, because as you throw the questions in there and the chat scrolls up, sometimes we can't go back and find those questions. So if you ask your question and we missed it, do remind us, and we apologise in advance. Anyway, let's crack on with just 2 or 3 little news topics that have come up this week, one of which I really do want to mention, because it is quite an important piece of sad news, and you have to excuse the local vicar who's just ringing his bells outside my window, quite literally. So if you hear anything like that,
oh yeah,
very faint.
Yeah, very faint, but he's there. Annoying that he is. So this is the very sad news that we lost Peter Zinovieff. Actually it was last week, but they announced it at the weekend. Peter, of course, if you didn't know, was one of the guys behind EMS. Started off in Putney, and of course is responsible for synthesizers such as the legendary VCS3 and the Synthia, and a bunch of other bits and bobs. And of course he was also a hugely important composer, particularly in the world of computer music and AI composition and sampling. I think he actually kind of lays claim to the event that he did invent digital sampling, which may be a point of contention. I don't know. I'm not going to argue. But anyway, Peter saw out his days in Cambridge, just down the road, and I was a few years ago. I came this close to going to visit him, and then things conspired and it didn't happen. But sadly, he suffered a fall and spent some time in hospital, and that was unfortunately the outcome. So quite sad. So JJ, I'm going to come to you. Did you ever meet Peter? Did you ever use any of his gear? Was it an influence on you in the early days at all?
I would say no.
No.
Because my first introduction to the worlds of synthesizers was really probably a CS80 Simmons drum kit, via the guys in Landscape.
Okay, yes.
So I didn't have a kind of route into what I did via traditional synthesizers as such at all. And later, when I was working for Jeff Downs, he had a couple of mini Moogs.
Okay.
So kind of got to hate them, really loved the sound, but man, you try to tune those buggers, they were just impossible. So I think that any synthesizer now, which kind of lurches towards the Behringer argument later, where you don't have to mess with analog tuning.
Yes,
it's got to be a good thing. But no,
absolutely.
I didn't ever work with him or come across him. But I did read that article, and I thought a couple of things were interesting. And one was that he had, I think it said something about 4 megabytes of RAM.
Yeah.
You know, wow. 4.
Yes.
4. That's quite something.
Indeed.
To work with what we would regard as a ridiculously small amount of memory. And the other was that he was basically like you and I, you and
he
me,
was.
probably.
He was, yes.
As a foreigner.
Half and half. Yeah, bits of this and the bits of that.
Yeah,
absolutely. Son of Russian aristocrats, I believe.
So it's a nice time for me to plug a book. It's not my book, but it's this.
Oh, look at that. Mk.II Syed, the power of diverse thinking. Rebel Ideas.
I really recommend this. I'm a big fan of his anyway.
Cool.
But that's one of the things he talks about how diversity is really a key. Yeah. And immigration is a key in terms of getting a dynamic input into a population.
Yeah, absolutely. And didn't he I think he sold a lot of the family jewelry to fund his initial studio as well, because he came from Russian aristocracy, or certainly came from that kind of bloodline, and he sold a whole bunch of the jewelry to fund the studio and his work. I
think that's interesting because basically he was onto something, but with all these things you can be ever so slightly ahead of the game.
Yeah.
Or too far ahead of the game, in fact. And I think he went broke, didn't he, at one point? So
he did, I think.
So he was right, and he did the right thing. But if there's lots of other things that aren't in sync, then it's like the stock market. You can be right in the stock market, but the stock market will kill you several times before you've proved yourself correct.
Quite, yeah.
So it sounds like an interesting guy.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Ben. EMS fan?
I would love some EMS stuff, but the best I can hope for is the imminent clones, the hugely important figure and real sad loss,
Yeah.
And the way as well, I always hate it when people have a fall or something, it's like they've gone before they should have done,
Yes.
And I don't know, it's just really sad.
Yeah. Yes, he had a very interesting and colourful life, but certainly he was a hugely important kind of influence on the entire industry and culture of electronic music. How about you, Cryss? Any thoughts on Zinovieff's passing?
Yeah, I mean he's done so much more than I realized that he had done. I think my connection with him would be through his synthesizers, and when I had started playing guitar and I started kind of checking out the old synthesizers and, stuff back in the 70s and what was, because that was the music that I was listening to in the early 90s, and trying to figure out where are these cool tones coming from. And so some of the first synthesizers that really came into my awareness, what little I could find out, because it didn't have the internet, was the Mini Moog and then the EMS stuff that Pink Floyd used. So
of course,
we owe this man a great debt, and it's sad to see him passing.
Yeah, he's often referred to as Britain's Bob Moog, because he did have that kind of that impact very early on. Although he never really quite saw the fuss, I think, in some of his gear. But certainly those of us that used it would have got excited about it. He just didn't quite see it. But of course, his legacy lives on. His instruments are being cloned or replicated in some fashion. I think one of the most obvious ones would be the Analog Solutions Colossus, which is kind of Tom's homage. It's not a direct kind of one-on-one replica, but it's an homage to the Synth 100.
It's definitely a nod, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Because it's huge and it's like a desk, and it has all these oscillators that do amazing things. And if you want to hear a really good example of that being used, the original, the Synth 100 being used, the Belgian act Soulwax recently released an album called EMS Synth 100, and it's like a 6-part sort of sound collage of just EMS Synthy 100, which is quite amazing.
Robbie, what was used on the Who's Barbara O'Reilly? What was that?
Now I have to make sure I have to think about this, because there was Barbara O'Reilly was
that'd be the
Lowry organ. That's it. Yeah, it was a Lowry organ and the marimba repeat. Or was that? Yeah, because
there was because one of them, like you said, was one was the Lowry organ into what was it, a VCS 3?
A VCS 3, yeah. And that was won't get fooled again. Let me get this right. Won't Get Fooled Again was the Lowry organ with the marimba repeat function on it, and then Barbara O'Reilly was the Lowry organ going through a sample and hold filter on the VCS 3, I think it was. Although some people claim it might have been an ARP 2500, but I think that's just because Peter had one of those at the time. But it was a VCS 3, I'm pretty sure. I'm sure people will clear us up in there. But yeah, I always get those two mixed up. But yeah, it's fascinating, use of the technology.
Yeah. So Robert says, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Chris. No, go ahead.
Robert says, "Won't Get Fooled Again" was the organ into the VCS3. Bob O'Reilly is a marimba repeat.
Yeah, I can never remember which way around. I have to sort of play in my head.
I'm the same way. I always forget that. But it is interesting how those songs came to be.
That's right, yeah. Because I've actually got a patch on the Alesis Fusion that Steve Howell programmed that was that organ sound, and then he just literally put it through a sample and hold. And it's just, it sounds amazing. But
run the tape, right?
Yeah, quite. Yes,
that sounds good. Record it, quick. Yeah. What do you mean you're in safe? Oh, God.
Always have record switched on.
Yeah.
If you can afford to.
Also to be mentioned too is Arturia on their, I think it was the latest V collection, put out the Synthy, and then maybe it was the one before had the Buchla on there, and just a great way to get to know some of these instruments that are so very rare that most of us won't ever get to play one. Robert Native ES had gotten his Buchla stuff the other day and was playing through it, and it got me to go on to the Arturia stuff on my computer and play around. Let me figure this out, because I've seen this stuff so many times. Let me see how it works, and it's quite fascinating. And
in a lot of modern instruments, I mean, we were looking at the Uno Synth Pro the other week, and there's a patch on there that is called. It's named after the Pink Floyd track
sequence.
And it's exactly that. I mean, it sounds very close. It's not the same, but obviously. And of course, another great exponent of the VCS3 is David Vorhaus with his Kaleidophon, his very phallic. He does this motion, but I've actually seen that VCS3. I've been up, I've touched it. Serial number 0001, the very first one. It's amazing, and hopefully I'll get back to see Dave and talk to him about that later on. Once all of this is over.
So what was Peter responsible for at EMS? Was he synthesized?
Well, there was. I don't. Yeah, it was kind of a bit of everything. So there was Peter, there was Tristram Carey, and of course David Cockrell, who did a bunch of amazing stuff. And I think most people will probably remember David for his work with Akai and the Akai samplers and everything. But he started there with Tristram and David, and I think between them they all kind of chipped in and did amazing stuff. There's a picture I posted up on the group of the studio in Putney, which was kind of subterranean, and it's just full of stuff. And Peter's kids are playing with all this amazing equipment in 1973 or something.
I was just wondering if that modulation matrix was any of his doing.
Oh, the pin matrix. Yeah, I don't know who came up with that. And still, it's still kind of used by some gear today. But anyway,
it's kind of the theory behind that, the matrix brute.
Indeed, yes.
It's just done in a different way.
Exactly. But very sad news that Peter has passed away. But we shall revel in his legacy for many, many years to come, I am sure. Right, couple bits more, bit more news, and then we'll crack on with speaking to JJ about his life and career in the industry and the business. And I'm going to just kind of bunch these two together. It's the news that Behringer, they've actually had a very busy week. They've been quiet like most, and over the last few months, but they have announced a whole bunch of gear. We spoke about some of it last week, and then one of the things we spoke about last week was this teaser advert that sounded like an 808 drum machine, and we're thinking, well, no, they've done their version of the 808, so what is this? Is this maybe is this a Eurorack module that features 808 samples, or is this a drum machine that has an 808 sample set but loads of other sample sets? Turns out we were all completely wrong, and what they've actually done is just reissued one of their clones, shall we say, or replicas, in the form of the RD8 Mk.II. And the reason for doing this is they have refined the internal design, and they've actually managed now to build a successful replica of the 662, the BA662 chips? Yeah, the 662A. Which is responsible, I am told, for the clap sound on there, which of course is a very important clap sound if you are an 808 aficionado. But apparently there's some other kind of tweaks and things in there. And my first thought about this was the Mark I only came out about a year or so ago, and now they're selling the Mk.II and saying it's even better than the Mark I, which we said was the closest you could get to an 808. And so, forget the allegations of plagiarism. 1 year after releasing the original, they've released a new update, which is not a firmware update, it's a hardware update. If you've got the first one, it's tough. You can't change anything. If you want this, you're going to have to go out and buy it. What's everyone's thoughts? Chris, what do you think about this?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's natural for them to do this because now they've got that BA662 in production, so why not put it in? Now, that said, that's the VCA chip, I believe, and I don't really think it's going to make a big difference over the discrete design that's already in there. So I would say, there's the tendency to feel like, oh, I'm bummed out because I bought this other one, now there's this better one. To be honest, I don't think it's going to be that much better. I think it's going to pretty much sound the same, or very close anyway. Not so much that it would be worth losing some money on your first one and going out and buying the second one. So, I think the more interesting thing about this for me is that because these chips are coming into production, is that we'll see maybe more classic Roland designs that Roland refuses to make now coming into production. The one bummer about this, though, is what Kent says is in the chat, is that they did it as surface mount and not through hole. So it would be great if they also did some through holes for repairing old synthesizers. That would be wonderful. I hope they do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I was having a chat with Kent the other day, and he said, if one thing comes out of what Behringer do, one positive thing, it's that these chips now exist in terms of servicing old machines that use them, because apparently Jupiter 8s are full of them. So it hopefully, if they produce the through hole versions.
I have a question, Robbie.
Yes, go for it.
Sorry.
No.
What's through hole?
Go on, Chris.
On a circuit board, if you think about electronics, especially in classic synthesizers or old guitar amps and stuff, the physical part, like a resistor, the leads go through the circuit board through a hole.
Okay.
Modern stuff that's miniaturized just sits on top of the board and is soldered, but it's much smaller. So there's been quite a shift.
Yeah, because I think it's
just go into the more of the old sort of stick it in and solder it type.
Yes,
approach,
yes.
Which is through hole, right? Well, I learned something. That's excellent.
There you go.
I had no idea. It's very interesting.
I learn something every week.
Literally every card in the Fairlight is through hole. As my fingers will attest, every time you take one out, you stab yourself with a myriad of the stumps at the other side of it. So, Ben, I mean, did you... I can't remember, you didn't go for the RD8, did you?
No. I didn't. And... I think it's really odd. I agree with what Chris is saying. If they've, successfully replicated this chip now, it does make sense to include it. But It's the way they've done it. It's as well. It's like the Mk.II. You could have just done it like, you know, keep quiet about this one. We messed up on the first one. You know, just like stick that chip in it and say.
But don't you think they would have come in for more grief if they just snuck it out?
I don't know, but it just seems harsh on the people who's bought it, don't they?
Yeah.
You know, they were promised an 808 clone, and now it turns out that it's more an 808 alike. You know, now we can get it much better, and you're not going to get anything back, or you know, you're not even going to get money off the Mk.II.
I guess it's
harsh.
I guess it's a situation they can't win, because if they don't do it, they're sitting on this better improved technology.
Yeah.
But if they do it, then people are going to say, "Well, I spent £300 and something last year, and now effectively my machine is out of date."
In what way is it improved, Robbie?
So it's improved by the.
Sorry, I'm going to ask difficult questions.
No, absolutely.
About this is new to me.
So
I'm intrigued. I tell you what, just one other thing before you answer that question. I have a supplementary question.
Okay.
Which is, when you span up the picture of the front of that board, what I immediately noticed of the front of the rhythm composer, it looks like they've scroll down, keep going. Yeah, no, the other way. Sorry. Yeah. Keep going. Stop. Okay, bit of delay.
The delay.
Okay. Rhythm designer, they pretty much got the font right by the looks of it.
Oh yes,
it's spot on, isn't it?
they get the fonts and the colours. I think there's also there's this thing about trade dress that Roland are very protective of, and they have copyright. So I think what Behringer have done, certainly with other machines, is they've just changed enough so that it doesn't kind of tip over the edge in terms of the trade dress. But yes, it is very.
The reds aren't quite the same at the bottom.
Something, something like that.
Out of interest, then, why is it that Roland are not doing all this?
Because apparently, this is another great debate. So apparently, Roland's statement was, "We don't chase analog ghosts." So in other words, we don't want to, go back to our past and redo all that. We are forward thinking. We want to do new stuff. However, since they said that, they've released what they call a boutique version of the 808 drum machine. So it's kind of like a miniature version, but it's all using analog modeling technology rather than the actual analog stuff itself. They've also released software versions of it, and there are modern kind of interpretations of it called, there's the TR8, which is kind of a modern version of it, has all those kinds of sounds in it. But they don't want to revisit the past, essentially. That's the reason.
They have no relationship with Behringer at all.
No. Well, the only relationship I would say was a litigious one. It's well documented that Behringer have long since been treading on the toes of not just Roland but other companies as well. And
just to go back to the first question JJ asked that was going in line with what you and Ben and Robbie were talking about. There's going to be so little difference between these two versions. I mean, they're so close in sound that it's not going to make much difference. So just what's going on here, that one chip that they're making, so this integrated circuit that we saw the picture of on that page, in that one die is just a collection of transistors that make up that part there. So the old version, the Mk.I version, that part is just expressed in individual transistors on the board. Yeah. So it's still doing the same thing. It's still doing the same function, and it's just the VCA.
So you're telling me that this thing that we're looking at, which is an amalgam of transistors into that... all right, okay.
So my point is that people are getting really upset about not a whole lot. Not about, this is cool that they're making it and they're putting it in there. This is not going to make a big difference in the sound that this unit is making. That's why I was saying, like, people that have the Mk.I versions, you got the original color scheme with those white keys, so be happy, because this new one has the black keys on where the white keys are.
It's the MIDI integration and all that sort of business, the same functionality, so if that's not changed, then...
Not from the Mk.I, it's the same. I mean, it's got more than the original ever had. The original didn't have MIDI, did it? So
No, absolutely. So, so in effect, so this is nuance. by the sounds of it.
But it's, I mean, yeah, if you've wanted the 808 sound with the 808 paradigm of programming, then this is a great way of getting into it. And it's an affordable way of getting into it, because obviously Roland don't make this thing anymore, apart from the small boutique things. Although DinSync are supposed to be making an 808 clone as well, so be interesting. But I don't know. There's just, I mean, we're now kind of, are we getting a bit tired of 808s and 909s? I don't know.
Are we going to say the same thing when it comes up to the Lindrum?
Well, I have to say, the Lindrum is my drum machine that I've always wanted, and getting an original, unless your name's Simon Alexander, where you've got an LM1 and an LM2. Hello, Simon. By the way, I know you're in the chat room.
Hasn't got a detune pot on the bass drum.
He'll pop up in the chat room and let me know, but I'm sure he probably has
killer.
Something.
Trevor had one.
Yeah,
and it was very significant. Just to drop that bass drum and take that slight blat out of it and just drop the note a bit. And he was ahead of the game in terms of going lower.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's been one of the greatest parts of having these clones and these remakes, is that if they're keen enough to add some of the features and mods that people have done over the years, it really makes it a more versatile unit. And this RD8 is a lot more functional than original 808. Now, the 808, the Roland 808 is going to always have its value and its significance.
Oh, yeah.
But if we're talking like you're just sitting in your studio, like it's nicer to have the one that has MIDI and that you control the pitch of the bass drum and all of that.
Yeah, definitely. And the same would go for like the Lindrum. I'm almost certainly going to be in the market for their version of the Lindrum, because I love the Lindrum and I want to have that kind of experience, and it will give it to me.
Tell me about why you love it, Rob.
It's the sound, and I think it's the same. One of the reasons I love the Fairlight was the sound. It's just on all of those pieces of music that were very important to me at certain times throughout my youth. But there's just something about that sound. I guess in my head, it's become kind of romanticized. But because so many pieces of music that I love have the Lindrum on it, that it's just made me want a Lindrum.
But do you feel there's a possibility here that you might be post-rationalizing your infatuation with this particular piece of kit, and actually it could have been any number of things at the time?
Yes,
and it was. I tell you, one of the things that interested me about that box was the groove.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because whether I don't know whether you guys discussed this or not, but for me, all those boxes had a groove. Even though it was electronic and it was on and off, right. Some of them stank, and some of them just kind of were amazing.
Yeah. Well, the Lindrum was famous.
Had that thing,
Yeah, because it had some of the samples. I think particularly the hi hat. There was just a slight delay at the beginning of the sample that gave it that kind of feel, which obviously was a feel that went on into Roger Lynn's other invention that he gave the world, was the Akai MPC, and that had that swing, that feel to it. It wasn't just the sounds; it was the groove, as you say. So absolutely. I mean, I get very romantic about these things, and I've probably told you, my first experience with a Fairlight was an incredible letdown, because I had built this thing up in my head as this magical beast that could do all of these wonderful things, and then I get one, I plug it in, turn it on, and think, Jesus, this is quite limp. And
that's just the start.
Exactly, yes, as I have found out over the last 10 years or so.
Let's not forget the feel of human drummers, which usually involved alcohol.
Yes, indeed. Yes. And I'm living up to that as we speak.
I think that's if you're going to talk about that, that's a rabbit hole we should not go down.
True, very true. So let's move swiftly on to the last bit of news, which is the other piece of Behringer news, and this is quite interesting. So a little while ago, they announced their clones, if we will, of the system or the Moog modular modules, which they did in the Eurorack format, so not the big original format. Now they have announced the System 15, the System 35, and the System 55. So they are effectively recreating the module sets that Moog released originally back in the day. So the 15, the 35, and the 55, with all of their versions of those particular components built into one or more of their is it the Behringer Go case. and they've even come up with some special side mounts for the System 55, and they retail for anything between $1,500 and $3,500, which for Behringer is quite expensive, although you are getting a lot, I guess, for your money. I'm just not into Eurorack at all. This doesn't interest me, but would this sway anyone into experimenting with this? Would this be your thing, JJ?
No, not at all. What's Eurorack?
Aha, right, okay. So Eurorack is a format or a size format of modular synthesis. So obviously modular synthesis is named as such because everything's on a module, and there are different form factors, different sizes, and Eurorack was a size format that was introduced about 20 years ago, around
probably almost 30, right?
Yeah, it could be. And it's just a small format, so it's kind of miniaturized.
Right behind me, but my Moog there is a little tiny rack of Eurorack stuff. So it's all modular, different units that are patched together there.
Oh, okay.
So much smaller than the original Moog suit, Series 55.
So it's basically, miniature. Well, I say miniature. It's minimized versions of the big racks of stuff. So you can have a System 55 that sits kind of on a desk rather than fill up half a room. Okay. But I don't know. I mean, I just still cannot get excited about Eurorack as a format, as a method. But I know that lots of people are getting moist about the gusset, shall we say, about stuff like this. Does this float anybody's boat? I mean, Ben, would this get you into it?
I'm in two minds about it, really, because I think like part of the appeal of the old modular thing is I want to try that oscillator with that filter. I think that's going to make my unique sound, and then I'm going to slap these envelopes on it instead of the ones that everybody else is going with. So you end up making something that is unique, well, as much as it can be uniquely yours. This is pre-done, but this is what Moog did back in the day, so it's nothing new there. But I quite like that. I quite like somebody doing all the work for me. I think like, this could be my route into it, so I don't have to think about how it all works, and I don't have to make the mistakes and buy the wrong things and sell them again, and I might just go straight for the jugular. And, just my first foray into modular is a System 55 clone. But I don't know. It does sound pretty good. I've got to be honest. I've been listening to the demos and that, and it's it's close, very close to the Moog sound, and that is a phenomenal synth sound.
Simon makes a good point in the chat room. To Behringer supply a magnifying glass for old buggers like me, which is a fair point because all of these modules were designed as in the large format. So I don't know how big, but it's about this big. And one of the things that really puts me off about Eurorack is you've got all these modules and all of these patch cables, and they all just sit across all of the controls. And you see people like kind of contorting themselves to get to the filter cutoff or the volume or something, and they've got this spaghetti junction of cables in front of it. It just really doesn't appeal to me at all. Chris, appeal to you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that spaghetti junction, that is the appeal, the mad scientist laboratory kind of thing is what appeals to a lot of Eurorackers. And it has a certain aesthetic and feel about it. Obviously, my rack is very small, so I enjoy it, but I don't use it a whole lot. It actually mostly gets used in conjunction with my matriarch, or when I get the Korg. Why did I say Korg? My ARP 2600 running. They'll all be working together. But this is kind of one of the things that I thought from the beginning. Like, well, I'm surprised they haven't set this up as a whole collection. And I think it will probably bring a few more people in. Like Ben had said that they don't want to mess with everything, and so here's the whole system. The surprise will be that once you get the whole system, that you are going to have to figure out how it works. So,
well, quite yes. There will be a fairly steep learning curve, no doubt.
Vertical.
So, JJ, does this kind of thing appeal to your sensibilities at all? Or?
Well, it's interesting actually. I found the whole discussion quite stimulating because we're Gary and I are going out doing some shows as we bill ourselves as the art of what. Question mark, exclamation mark. And we did, out of interest, we did a show in Turin pre-lockdown 2019, and we were called the art of whatever, which we preferred. Right. Yeah, we were having a conversation about audio dynamic and how now you do these shows and you've got a big sound system and it can handle a lot of bass. And when we were working, a lot of bass was to be avoided. So actually, this is stimulating my interest in terms of how one might be able to combine the two.
Sounds interesting.
Well, yeah.
I think the whole thing is worth it if you just set it up with that single, with a patch with just a couple oscillators detuned and saw waves, and do the filter sweep into some stereo delay like Daniel, what's his name, off of Sweetwater.
I don't know his name. Yeah.
Why have I forgot? Anyways, yeah, he does those demos, and it's like the most simple patch, but it just sounds so beautiful. You sweep through that filter, and it's huge.
Yeah. But there you go, Behringer. System 15, System 35, System 55. My screen froze there for a minute, so I hope it didn't freeze for everyone else. That's available soon, I believe, and you buy that and you get the cases and everything with it for some not insignificant prices. That's all.
One thing. I was going to say that actually you were talking about the little patch cables.
Yeah.
And it made me think of looking at the screen now of, for example, Ableton, just choose one. You've got, in effect, a whole load of patching going on there, although not physically cables. You've got these colours and these shapes, and it's the same sort of kind of weirdness, not weirdness, but whoever commented about having a magnifying glass, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
And for me, one of those elements is how do you communicate with whatever it is to get this thing to do what you want it to do?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Or have a happy accident as you nudge something by mistake.
Yeah.
on the way through, and you go, "Wow, that's amazing."
Yeah.
Let's keep that.
That's something I think we can all relate to for sure.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, definitely. So there you go. That's the news for this week. There really isn't that much out there. I guess it's that time of year. It's the summer, and of course, Chipgate. There's a lot of.
We're in that kind of vacuum before now.
Yes, of course, summer now coming up soon. Right, okay, so let's get down to talking to JJ specifically about him and his career and everything else. But if you are not aware, and JJ's name is one of these names that kind of you see on record credits, but he's not a big visible pop star type musician, but it's certainly hugely influential. I'm just going to bring up a list of some of the recordings. I'm going to be really lazy here. I'm just going to use Wikipedia, but it's a fairly reliable resource in terms of this stuff. I was going to bring up a whole bunch of JJ related pieces of vinyl, but it just got too bloody heavy to lift up the stairs. It is an incredible body of work. So, as well as, of course, the Art of Noise, who are a groundbreaking, revolutionary group of people that did some amazing things with sound. Looking at this list here, let's just zoom in just a little bit. So we've got, starting off in 1981, Sat in Your Lap by Kate Bush. I was listening to The Dreaming just yesterday. Dollar, ABC, Malcolm McLaren. I need to speak to you about that because that album for me is just one of the greatest albums of all time. Yes, 90125. Of course, Frankie Goes to Hollywood, Propaganda, Scritti Politti, Stephen Tin Tin Duffy, Godley Creme, Pet Shop Boys, Eartha Kitt, Shakin' Stevens, no less, and Jean-Paul Gaultier. And there's a huge range of stuff, and I'm sure that is not completely exhaustive. That's just people that that you've collaborated with or worked with or performed with. And of course, there's the art of noise. So I'm going to start off the questions, and I'm sure we've all got some for you here. But before the art of noise, before you started working, because correct me if I'm wrong, the passage of time is Malcolm McLaren, then you worked on Yes, and from that became the art of noise happened after Yes, roughly.
One of the great regrets I have is that I didn't keep a diary. And it's interesting that you spanned that list up there, because I was reading as an article by somebody who on the Fairlight group on Facebook, and saying that he did quite a lot of the madness stuff and took over from me, and I'd completely forgotten. and I did driving in my car and House of Fun, and I'd completely forgotten.
I didn't even know that, and I'm a huge fan. I didn't even know that at all.
So I'm fairly confident that I remember that being the case, but I had completely forgotten. So your question was about the timeline.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, before you got recruited by Trevor, I guess, into that world of ZTT and before ZTT, I guess. Where did you? Is it right? You used to roadie for, or you helped landscape and Richard Burgess and that?
Yeah, well, Richard James Burgess is responsible for me being. Largely responsible, I should say, for me being how I ended up, but I'll come to that in a moment. But I moved to London. I was going to go and do an MA and discovered rock and roll, and so basically met Richard, and who else was there? Andy Pask, bass player, chap called Chris Heaton on. Oh, there's Rosie. Hello, Rosie. Rosie's on the interweb. Oh, Rose has brought me something to eat. Thank you very much. That's very kind. Could I just explain to my listeners, international listeners across the world, that I've had a very busy day out on the golf course and haven't eaten anything. And Rose has very kindly bought me what looks like a delicious meal of chicken home brew. Anyway, so Landscape were playing in a local pub.
Okay.
We used to go and see them, and they were great because they were all, professional musicians, unlike a lot of the bands that were playing then, and they were kind of playing jazz fusion.
Yeah.
Right when punk was happening, so it was an anomaly in itself, and I like that. And then we decided to book them for a gig, and I sold all my tickets, and I made a bit of profit, and I thought, ooh, this is good. I can make some money out of this, and so I ended up working for them and humping their gear around for a couple of years, and then Richard said, would I deliver his drums for him to sessions, which I did. Went around, he was very, very big. He was a great drummer, probably still is, great drummer. And he was one of those guys where I didn't appreciate it at the time, but they'd set him up and they'd have a quick sound check and start recording, and he was on it straight away. There was no kind of, I need another cup of coffee or whatever. Drummer's tape. But he was there, and he was always going on about metronomes and timekeeping and all that sort of stuff. And when we were doing those sessions, I met Jeff and Trevor, who were basically the Buggles, because he was working on the first album they did after Video.
Okay.
Killed the Radio Star. And sorry, my headphone keeps falling out. But so one push came to shove. I got a call from Jeff and Trevor. Would I go and work for them? And of course I went, no, I'm really happy. Slogging up and down the motorway to Aberdeen in a 2.5-ton truck. So I have paid my dues. I just want to say that. I had the odd collision with central reservations and motorways and other vehicles and other people and all that, and survived.
Yep.
So pretty much that happened, and then around that same time, Wakeman and Anderson left Yes, and Jeff and Trevor went off to be managed by Brian Lane, who was also the Yes manager. And Brian, being an astute businessman, and I'll leave it there, saw he had a replacement singer and keyboardist.
Right.
And so before knew what was happening, we were in Redown rehearsal studios with these guys who I had never heard of, doing some writing, which became the drama album, basically.
Right.
And then a tour followed, which was gruesome beyond belief, for me particularly. And I said to myself, I'm never going to do that again. And we came back to the UK, and Jeff and Trevor split up, and Trevor started ZTT. Well, he didn't start ZTT. He'd been working as a producer. And Gary basically managed to persuade him that he should get a Fairlight and not a Synclav.
Right.
And I had a conversation with Trevor about that, and suddenly this thing arrived, and he said, well, take it away and I'll give you a call when I need you, which is just extraordinary. Price of the value of a house.
Yes.
And so that was the beginning. But so essentially I kind of leapfrogged. I was doing sessions with Jeff's Fairlight on the Kate Bush stuff. McCartney's not on there, but I worked on a McCartney track.
Okay.
That was a seminal point. I mean, I basically became an independent programmer because Macca fired me from his gig.
Right. I've seen pictures of Paul McCartney and George Martin sat in front of a Fairlight, but nobody could ever kind of say where or if he even used it or whether he liked it or not. But I guess you might be able to elaborate.
I could elaborate. Basically, we were Air Studios, which was in those days at the top of Oxford Circus. Amazing studio. I can't remember what we were working on, but there was the most massive thunderstorm and inundation, and the glass between the control room and the live room filled with water because it was on the top floor of Air, and we had to abandon work. And at the same time, Jeff was rehearsing with probably Trevor Rabin, Steve Howe, and the early parts of Asia, but I can't be sure for sure. And he phones me up and said, "You've got to come over. The rain's pouring all over my keyboards."
Oh no!
So I said to Macca, "I've got to go. Got a bit of a problem." And he went, "Sure, no problem." So I went and sorted out Jeff's keyboards and moved them all and got them out of the water and all that sort of business. And when I got back, Macca said, "Sorry, mate, but we need someone who's here all the time. We're going to have to get someone else in."
That sounds like the fella I know. Yeah.
Really? Well, you know what? I thought it was a fair point, actually. Because basically, when you go and do a session, you can't go teaching and go, "Oh, sorry, I've got to go," halfway through a lesson. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
But the point was that I then went and had a chat with Jeff, and he said, "Well, look, you got to decide what you want to do." And I went, "Well, I'm going to go freelance." And he went, "Okay, fine, that's great. Bon chance."
Yeah.
And then soon after, Trevor says, "What about it?" And
was that so when Trevor effectively gives you the keys, and it was the keys to the Fairlight, was that literally your first ever experience of that machine or technology of that caliber?
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, when Landscape were working, they'd groove around and play with they'd have little boxes. One was a clapatron or something.
Right.
All it did was claps off a foot switch. I mean, we're talking really basic stuff here. Excuse me. Andy Pask had some sort of small, I think it was a Boss drum box, and it had a bass drum and a snare in it.
Okay.
And that was all. And he turned it on and dialed up the speed. No one knew what the speed was. It just came out of a mono output.
Yeah.
And that was it. So Cryss Heaton keyboard player had a CS80, and all I remember was it was a 3-man lift.
Yeah.
And forget flight cases. What a nightmare.
Yeah.
They're all very well and good building all these things, but no one ever thinks about how you're going to move them around, you know.
Yeah.
So not really, no, because so I kind of got parachuted straight into the Fairlight. Really, I realised as soon as I bumped into the thing, because Richard Burgess said, you know, the future is all in computers. You should learn to type, and that was a pivotal moment. And the Fairlight came along, and I went, oh, so this is it, right?
Yeah. And so, was it literally a case of sitting down with the manual and just figuring it all out from there?
Yeah, Jeff and I used to do that when they were recording Steve Howe, or not recording Steve Howe, actually. We'd sit and play with the Fairlight. And I seem to remember the manual we got was about 20 pages. It was ridiculous. It had nothing, absolutely nothing. Plug this here, turn that thing, good luck, you know. Spent a lot of time phoning Australia or Steve Payne or Steve Rance and going, why is this happening? Have you moved it? Yes, we've moved it. Well, push all the cards back in again and kick it,
yes.
You know, all that.
No, that's quite well.
You can't move it really. You can't move it. You must, you know, leave it to settle down for a day and it'll be fine. Yeah. So no, it was just a matter of messing around with. I remember us spending hours. Is there a line in and a mic in on that, Rob? I can't remember.
Yes, there is. Yes. If we're talking, series
on the
1 or
series,
2,
yeah. So I don't think they were necessarily well labelled. Actually. And I do remember there being quite a lot of faffing about trying to figure out why there were a problem with the levels. And it was a matter of patching and also output, you know, because you got that chain thing, you got the output of the desk and you got the input side of the sampler. And if you're going in the line or you're going in the mic or whatever, it was, you know, just we were finding it all out, basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so coming back to the Macca session, he said, I've recorded this trombone. So we played this trombone in, I sampled it and attempted to loop it. And he started playing chords on his thing. And it sounded terrible. I mean, really, really bad. And he said, well, that doesn't sound much like a horn section. I said, which is a very astute comment. And I went, no, it sounds like a bit like a Hoover to me, to be honest. And it was about that moment that I realised that this was not the way forward for the Fairlight.
Right.
And it became, at that moment, literally at that moment, I thought, there's no point in doing this. If you want a horn section, get a horn section.
Yeah.
But I did spend an awful lot of my time when I had Jeff's machine going around to people's studios and then going, you know, we've heard it can replace this and it's going to replace musos and all that sort of business. And I went, okay, you really want to hear this thing? Here we go. And they're going, what the hell is that?
Yeah.
You know, and like you said when we were chatting before the show, Rob, it's kind of, you know, it's a bit disappointing.
Yes.
And it became apparent to me quite early on that Gary Langan was working wonders with the outputs, you know, just like, whoa, that's incredible. And he had this extraordinary view of how to make the output of the Fairlight sing in a way. And it took me a long time to figure this out. And I'd go to all these sessions and the engineers would sit there scratching their heads, you know, going, well, it sounds like shit. I'm going, well, it is. You know, I'm sampling at 14080 to get a bit of time on the sample, which means bandwidth, if you'll know better than me, it's terrible.
Yeah.
Well, none, actually.
Exactly, yeah.
But then it began to suit certain things that I started to sample more than others because that was the way I sampled. And so the whole thing rolled together.
Right.
Because I was desperate to get more time out of it. You can't do much with 0.6 of a second. No,
quite. So tell me about how the McLaren album came about, because as I said before, that's one of my all-time favourite albums ever, but it's also one of my all-time favourite Fairlight albums. And you know, I've heard Trevor speak about, you know, quite a tortuous recording process with McLaren, obviously being Malcolm McLaren. What was your input on that that record in terms of using the Fairlight? What did Malcolm make of it, or was it? I'm assuming he probably didn't care too much about the technology.
Is my camera off still?
No, carry on.
Malcolm. Well, I would say that Gary and I agree that without Malcolm, the Art of Noise probably would not have happened.
Right.
Mainly from a conceptual and thinking and process point of view. By which I mean, Malcolm used to say, "Why not? Mm-hmm. You won't do that, or you can't do that." And so for him, that was, you know, he didn't come out of the recording sort of media, rather like me. So he was going, "Well, why can't you do that?" And he was always challenging the status quo. So we were working on, I don't know, 16-track machine or something, and he'd go, "Well, can we put the edit from that song into that?" And Trevor would go, "Well, that would mean another 16-track machine, Malcolm." He goes, "Well, why not?" And so he's way ahead of himself in terms of his approach of kind of, "Well, can't you do that? Why not? Let's just try it." Mm-hmm. And Gary and Trevor went off around the world, at the States and South Africa, mm-hmm. recording all this music. Malcolm had absolutely no idea what was going on. He had this great concept. Yeah, you know, it was this great concept, and it was pretty much in his head. Mm. And you know, there are many legion stories of Gary and Trevor going off and doing all this stuff, which I had nothing to do with at all. Right. I'd get the call, and when they were back in London, and I'd get fed all these samples which they'd tracked up, and I'd put them in the Fairlight. And Trevor says, by the way, unfairly, at one point, that I spent a week sampling Teresa Bizarre. Right. I did take a long time, but I can assure you it wasn't that long. And I want to put the story straight, because what happened was, I'm jumping around, so you have to reel me back into Malcolm.
Sure, yep, no worries.
So I'm jumping to the dollar. And so that Gary and Trevor hacked up this idea, let's track up a single La from Teresa. And they put me in the copy room at Psalm East and went, here's the half-inch, quarter-inch, whatever it was. Mm-hmm. Sample these up, and then we'll get Anne in and we'll get her to play them. So I spent, you know, best part of a day in there. And it was hard work. I mean, it really was hard work, editing all these samples and putting them in. And it was more difficult because Gary Bloody Langan, excuse the language, had control over the tape machine that I was using from the master control room where he was working with Trevor. Right. And I didn't realise this until I went for a cup of tea and I came back. And I was diligently, it had been leaded up, you know, I'd play the sample, reset the thing, go to 0, make a note, diddle-a-diddle-a, wibble it backwards and forwards, sample and all that sort of business. And so I was being very diligent, making notes and everything. And it wasn't until I came back from getting a cup of tea that I saw him spinning the tape machine backwards and forwards and then randomly re-zeroing it. And I thought, you bastard. So I'd spent hours going round and round and round trying to figure out what the hell was going on because he was keep re-zeroing the bloody tape machine. And so when Trevor tells the story, he's prone to exaggeration, obviously, like we all are. And he goes, it took a week. Well, it would have been a lot quicker had Gary not been messing around with the tape remotes. He kind of thought this is very funny. Yeah. But anyway, so going back to Malcolm, so the same thing would apply. I'd get a call. We've done these edits. Come and whack them in the Fairlight, put them in the Fairlight, and then Anne would come in. And then the process of trying to figure them back into the track, because you remember that Trevor brought over the Supreme team. Yes. Who were the guys who were doing this proper scratching, and none of us knew what on earth that was all about. But I suddenly realised that I thought, well, if they're doing that, I can steal some of that, sample some of that stuff. It begins with the same letter. True. Steal, sample. You're talking about clones and copies. You know. So they were doing all these wonderful wibble stuff. And Gary was recording it because Gary always had a half-inch on record all the time. Right. Mm-hmm. All the time, which I think he learnt from his days with Queen. Mm-hmm. So I think Mk.II said, just record everything all the time. Record it. Just record it. And he'd chop the stuff up and go, let's have a listen to see how that sounds. Mm. And then Anne would come in and go, okay, that's nice. And I might change the what we would call, what you guys would call the ADSR, and trim the front, and you know, nice little taper at the end and all that. I never really liked looping very much because it sounded terrible.
Yeah,
it only worked when, as you know, when you have a perfect in tune waveform.
Yeah,
and if you're sampling naturally occurring items, that does not exist, right? Even amplitude, diddle-diddle-diddle, you know. So, Anna would start playing, and then go, okay, can you spice it up a bit, Gary? And he'd start putting a reverb on it and a delay, and then a delayed. Run the track, crank it up a bit, and off she'd go. And often it was first take, and got recorded onto the multi-track. Excuse me. And that's how that worked. So I got bought in and got fed bits.
Right.
Anne would come in and play them. Gary would, you know, make them sound awesome, bounce around in the track and all that sort of business. A bit like a guitar solo, you know, that old trick of giving a guitarist lots of delay and echo so they play less because they're always inclined, with respect, obviously, to guitarists. They don't know how to restrain themselves. And, you know, if you've got something that goes to 11, why would you?
Well, yeah.
So he would set up these quite complex delays. And also the other thing that Gary did, and Steve Lipson did as well, was they managed to create this incredible glassiness to the sound. And I don't know if you understand what I mean, but to me, certainly if you all listen to all of Lipson's tunes that he mixed, there is this. I always thought it was a knob. I've got to say, I thought it was a knob because I'm not an engineer, right? I thought it was on the SSL. There was a glassy meter, right? And you just turned it up, and it was a secret meter that some people like Lipson and Langham knew about, and a lot of other people didn't. But I've since learned that's not the case. But also, Gary, both of them were experts with the 224 XL.
Yeah.
And I've frozen. Am I back? I'm back.
Yeah.
And so the output would come out of the Fairlight, and then it would take on this new life.
Yeah.
And Gary used to do this great thing of being able to get these rolling delays, which were ever so slightly out of time, because he used to do them manually. Right. So, unlike your modern thing where you can quantize the hell out of everything, if you listen to our stuff, it had this rolling aspect to it.
Yeah.
And it is because he was manually deciding the delay time, and it wasn't tempo based because we didn't know what tempo was in those days. We go, oh, that sounds good. Let's have a go. So that's in that and Malcolm thing that we built that whole thing, which was they'd have the sounds, they'd have the bed. Malcolm would have this mad idea of rapping. Anne would come in and put a bit of melody on it, and then we step over to the Fairlight and I go, okay, I got this, and this. So it's a bit like going to a restaurant. You know, what would you like for first course? What would you like for second? You know, and then that sounds good. Let's play with that.
Yeah, very much a team effort.
It was a team effort, and with the benefit of hindsight, what was interesting about it was that it was a very positive outcome, in as much as I now realise with the passing of time that everybody was on their game. And so that Anne, for example, would come in and listen to a track for about 30 seconds ago, okay, it's E minor to F, and off she go, and literally take 10 seconds to figure it out. And so there wasn't hours and hours and hours of taking, going, do you think you could just get that second note, play it a bit later? There's none of that stuff. It was like, great.
Yeah.
And on and on and on. So, and decisions were being made all the time to keep things or bin them.
Right.
And none of that sort of, well, let's fix it in the mix. Gary used to pretty much mix things as he went along.
Okay.
And so decisions were being made all the time about where things would sit in the overall balance.
So the next project, again, correct me if I'm wrong, the next major project with you guys was 90125 with Yes? 82?
Well, we do, we bounced through ABC.
Oh, of course, yes.
Yeah,
ABC,
that was a big thing. That was can I tell you about my David Bowie moment? Everybody asked me.
Please do. Yeah.
Well, we were working on an ABC track in Who was the main producer for Bowie?
Tony Visconti.
Yeah, in Visconti's studio somewhere in town.
Okay.
He had 2 or 3 studios. And I went into the office, and there was this bloke with terrible teeth and blonde hair talking about the price of gold and reading a certain type of magazine, which I won't go into details. Right?
Okay.
I didn't know who this guy was. And so we have a chatting away about the price of gold, blah, 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 whatever it was. And so I go back in the studio, and Gary says, is Bowie still here? And I went, oh, is that the geezer with the funny teeth and thing? I had no idea.
Wow.
Because the last time I'd seen him, he was all wearing all the gear. He was wearing T-shirt and jeans and looking quite normal.
Mm.
So that was the day I met David Bowie. But apparently he came in and commented on the tracks. He quite liked I think Mark, the drummer, was there as well, and he left, and then Bowie came in, and then Gary said, "You'd never best have been in here. It's been," and Bowie's been in there. All going, "Oh man, we're all going out to shops and missed him." Great moment. So ABC, that was a bit of an epic. And what a great album! What a great album!
One of the best. I mean, it's not one of those albums that you would instantly say, "Oh yeah, that's got lots of Fairlight in it." Because it's very, it's got that gloss, it's got that sheen, it's got Anne's wonderful orchestrations and all of that stuff. How much?
That was her first outing into string arrangement.
Yes, and what a way to kind of enter that world. I mean, amazing. What was your work on that album then, in terms of?
Well, that included my first keyboard playing that was recorded on the track, which was the "Speak No Evil" bit.
Oh yes.
Recorded Julian Mendelssohn. He went out in the studio, put him in the Fairlight, detuned him, the old trick. And Trevor said, "Well, we need it in the track." He said, "You play it." And I went, "What?" He said, "Go on, just play anything, play." And it kind of worked. Gary recorded it, and that was it.
Wow.
So there were what were there? There were at that time it was mainly kind of, I would say, the best way to describe the Fairlight on that was kind of sound effecty.
Okay, yeah.
Mood enhancing. It wasn't a big deal at all because basically they had everything recorded.
Yeah,
proper music.
Indeed.
None of that electronic rubbish.
Yeah, because it's not distinctly an electronic album, is it, as such? But
no, not
it's still it's an epic piece of production as well. Yeah. So then after that, 90125 comes along, and you're working on that. Is it true? And I've read it a number of times, but I need to ask: is it true that, as far as the genesis of Art of Noise, obviously you guys had been working together as a team for a few years already? Is it true that Gary was picking up tapes that Trevor had kind of consigned to the bin during the Yes sessions of, say, Alan White's drumming, and then instead of actually doing as he was told and throwing them away, he was giving them to you to feed into the Fairlight, and then that's kind of how the Art of Noise drum sound appeared and that kind of thing? How true is that?
That's about as true as it is true. I mean,
wow.
I think it would not be. What happened was, Gary says, and I don't know about this process, but he was in a battle with Hugh Padgham for getting the biggest drum sound, and it was that was the vogue back in those days, like a huge boom bash crash stuff. Yeah. And I think it was the Townhouse, it might have been Air, and the Yes guys were doing this track, didn't really work out. Gary I think he had the talkback mic on, and he started recording. He'd left everything in record and then listened back to this thing, and it was Alan playing through the talkback mic, which was hanging in the ceiling in the drum booth. Yeah. And he's going, bloody hell. Cheap as chips mic. He's going, good grief. And so he managed to persuade Alan to stop playing tom-toms, stop playing cymbals, stop playing hi-hat, just play bass drum snare and then put the hi-hat back in.
Yeah.
And then one Friday, he said to me, I've got a bit of an idea. And I went, oh, I'm tired, Gary, I want to go home. He went, no, stick around. I've got lots of nice things for you to drink.
Oh, lovely.
And so that night, we threw what I called tack boom boom in there, which was basically a bit of a loop from that tape of Alan White playing bass drum and snare.
Right.
And
through a talkback mic.
Through a talkback mic. And Gary messed with it as well, of course. But I was focusing on other things, being tired, as I've explained, and sampled it at the wrong point in the bar. And so when you press the key, it started on the snare.
Right.
So it went snare, bass drum, rather than bass drum, snare, which is not a big issue, other than when you're working in bars, it's like, it's the and.
Yeah.
But we just put it in the Fairlight and got the tempo such that it started looping, and it was basically tack, boom, boom, tack, boom, boom, tack, boom, boom. But because it was across the bar line, it had this kind of weird feel to it. And we worked through the night, and we went in and Gary and I did the voices where we go, and the money backwards, and all that nonsense, because we were just basically having a bit of fun. And he said, music business is all about money. I went, yeah, money's all right. So we both went out and double-tracked money, and I just flipped it round.
Yeah.
And slowed it down, which is just the oldest trick in the book, but it's got generated this sort of character to it. And so we messed around with this, and on Monday, we're back. Gary plays this track to Trevor, and he goes, bloody hell. Get Anne in, put some music on it. He said, it's great, but it's just, needs some tonality. And that's basically what happened.
And was that beatbox? Was that what morphed into beatbox?
No, close to the edit. Well, close to the edit. And then I chopped up the samples.
Right.
And did it properly, and then created beatbox.
Gotcha. Okay.
But close to the edit is a loop. It was one of the first, out of time.
Yeah.
Loops.
But, I mean, crikey. I mean, that particular track for me, I remember hearing it the first time and thinking, what the hell is this? It's amazing. And then, because obviously we didn't have the internet back then, we couldn't research what was, being used. We had to wait until we saw you on the tube or on Top of the Pops, or we read an article in a magazine that said, told us what it was. It was this Fairlight.
What did we say in the magazines? Generally told fibs the whole entire time.
Exactly, especially when Paul Morley gets involved, because everything just gets completely
master
blown.
fibber.
Indeed, he's a legend. A man you love to hate and hate to love. Yeah, I mean, it was a stunning kind of entrance. Somebody in the chat room said, "Oh yeah, I was just going to. Can I just ask you this question? Is the dum, the famous art of noise, dum, is that Cryss Squire?"
Yes.
There you go.
Wow.
The late great Cryss Squire.
Taken from Leave It.
Oh, of course, yes, yeah. Because
that dum also appears on 90125.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things I love doing is listening through, and you hear, particularly, anything where you, Gary, and Trevor, little things just pop up in different places that clearly, demonstrate the DNA that's running through all of this stuff. And it's even today, I'm still hearing things that that was from that thing over there, and it's amazing.
Well,
stuff.
I used to have all my 5.5-inch floppies.
Yeah.
For the listeners, have you got access to a 5.5-inch floppy there, Robbie?
I've got 8-inch, the Fairlight 8-inch.
Oh, 8-inch.
Yes.
Show everybody an 8-inch floppy. Have you got one to hand?
No, I haven't. No, I'm sorry. They're all downstairs in boxes.
Are they? All down there. Anyway, I used to carry all my sounds in a big leather bag.
Wow.
And the library was so vast I could remember every single sound.
Yeah.
And used to lug that thing around with me. But I was going to talk about beatbox just a second.
Please do.
Was that one of the things that Gary was fantastic at was, I think, that he took the bass drum, snare drum, hi-hat and put it in through one channel in the SSL and did some magic with it.
Mm-hmm.
So it all started to work together in a kind of compression way, which I don't understand. Engineers will know what happened with that. And then the reverb and the gated reverbs and all that sort of stuff. And suddenly it became this thing that had real vitality and life. Because as we discussed previously, when you plug a speaker into the back of the Fairlight, it's pretty dire.
Yeah.
Needs a lot of help.
Absolutely.
And I didn't realise quite how amazing he was until I'd go and work somewhere else and wheel out the same sounds and go, this is my killer sound of the week. And they go, what was that?
Yeah.
God,
Indeed.
that's embarrassing.
Before we kind of move on down the line, I just wanted to give Ben and Cryss an opportunity to have, have you got any questions you want to throw JJ's way?
I did have some, and they were coming to mind, and then he was answering them as he was talking. So I was really intrigued as to what the Fairlight was doing on the Lexicon of Love, but I'm also intrigued to know if there was ever any rulers sampled in the Frankie Goes To Hollywood stuff.
Any what, sorry?
Rulers.
Yeah, there may well have been, because we certainly... I was talking to Anne about this just the other day, actually. Yeah. We sampled a ruler, and... it could have been. Could have been. There was quite a lot of desperation going on in those sessions.
Yeah.
And I would look round and go, that might work.
Yeah. I mean, it's the genesis of that track, Relax, is, the story of the different versions and iterations from, the band's original demos, which were obviously quite guitar and drums and bass kind of stuff. And then, of course, there's the legendary Blockheads version that Trevor had put together. And this morning, just as part of my kind of refreshing of my memory, I was listening to the CMI backing track, which I think is available on the Inside the Pleasure Dome box set that came out a few years ago. It was one of the bonus tracks, and it literally is just the Fairlight with nothing else, and it's pretty raw, shall we say, to be polite.
Well, if it is, it would have been the stripped out digital from the multitrack then.
Yeah, it must have been. I mean, I don't know how much of that ended up in the track that was released, because obviously there were so many different versions.
But again, the Magpie Me, we had what did we have? So I got the lads. Oh no, actually, it might have been Mark Rutherford, and they sang, or even all of them. I don't know. Anyway, but they sang the word "come," and I thought, well, that's a bit boring. So I just changed the ADSR, and put the start time into the sample, so it's
right,
and that became a new sound, and then I played the riff that the Blockheads came up with, and Andy doubled as well. So that was the same sort of thing, looking around for little snippets and messing with them slightly, so they weren't obviously anything really.
Yeah.
So the Relax, I was with Trevor. I with the benefit of hindsight, I was like holding. Was I holding Trevor's hand? No, I was there. I was there, kind of like as the stable one, because Anne was off doing other things. Gary was switching and going out to doing it. Lipson had joined the team, and so it was and I was there throughout all of it. And one of the most interesting aspects of that was when Trevor went home. We'd been at it for months. Yeah. And he went, "Oh, this is terrible. I'm going home. Wipe it all. Wipe it all." This is what he used to say. Wipe it all. It's terrible. And of course, all the top engineers get out a reel of tape and go, "Yeah, I wiped it, Trevor, and keep the original." Anyway, so we started messing about, and I put the piano eighth notes down and all that sort of stuff. And Andy starts playing these chords. And then Steve says the immortal words, "Well, I'll get my guitar out." So Trevor's gone, and so Lipson gets his guitar out, puts his legs on the console and starts playing the riff on his guitar, and you go, bloody hell, this guy can play guitar.
Yeah.
And so we were then messing about, having a great time, cranked it up, it's baked like a disco, and Trev comes back and goes, "What's this?" And we're all going, "Ooh, nothing." Who, me, sir? No, like naughty schoolboys. He says, "No, it's great, what have you done?" And we're just going, "Well, we're just looping around 8 bars." And he went, "Okay, fine, just play it to me, record it a bit." And he listened to it, went, "Right, okay, give me 20 minutes. And he wrote the whole arrangement into the limb.
Wow.
In his head. Okay, first chorus, first middle. He said, "Right, print that." And we were able to sync that with the limb and the Fairlight, and that was printed. Yeah. And that was the beginning of it, basically.
Yeah.
But that brings me to another point, interestingly. We're talking about grooves and everything. A lot of the Art of Noise stuff, we would only ever use about 7 or 8 tracks, and we put them down on a 24 track and then get people to play, and mainly, over the top. So you had that blend of thump, crash, wallop with these rolling decay times and reverbs and everything, and then Anne playing across the top. So you had that movement across a bed of really solid locked-in groove, which is quite an interesting aspect. I mean, it never occurred to me that's what we did, but that's what we did.
Yeah. So before we come on to the art of noise, I want to ask you about Two Tribes, because that's something that I'm a huge fan of, that particular track. There are elements on that production where the bass... am I right in saying that the bass sound in that track is an amalgamation of yourself with the Fairlight, Andy with the PPG, I think there was some acoustic or electric bass on there as well. Essentially, there were like kind of 5 constituent parts to the bass line, and then Trevor's just kind of mixing the blend of those throughout the song. So when you listen to it, when during the chorus, it's quite an aggressive version of that bass track, and then during some of the quieter parts, he's dialed some of it back. I mean, do you remember much about that particular session?
As I said, I didn't keep a diary.
Sure.
And I think I wasn't that involved in Pleasure Dome, actually.
Okay.
But I do know that Louis Jardim played bass on that.
Oh, right, yes.
And I think the story was he came in and went, Trevor, it won't take long, it's easy part. And 12 hours later, they were still there.
Yeah.
And it was around the time then that Lipson thought, hang on, we've got this thing called the synclavier sitting there. Maybe I could use that. And I think he then went into a major deconstruction mode using that.
Okay.
Because he could, he said somewhere. And I think, if anything, it's probably more synclavier based, but based around loosely formulated around Louis' bass playing.
Right. Okay. Because I've seen Trevor attempt that bass line, playing it on his 5-string live on at least 2 or 3 occasions, and it's always a lot slower than the record, because it's quite a fast-paced bass line. But I can't imagine anybody having. Well, there must be some bass players that have got the chops to play it that fast. But it is a really, it's a pacey bass line, and I just, when you listen to the 12-inch mixes, you can hear these kind of different elements. It's the same bass line, but this part is clearly an electric bass. Then this part is clearly a PPG, and this probably a synclavier or something else.
Yeah.
And it's just this masterful blending of stuff.
Trevor was always one of the best examples. I was listening to Billie Jean, Michael Jackson, the other day, just by chance, and it's a really interesting arrangement. So I suddenly thought, what's going on in the chorus? And the chorus is a different snare to the whole of the song.
Right.
And it suddenly jumps out. It's not loud in itself, but it's different.
Right.
And Trevor was very, very good at that sort of thing in terms of the shape of the sound in relation to the shape of the arrangement.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, we've heard the chorus, right? So we need to do the same thing, but we need to take something away or add something in that makes this chorus as memorable but different from previous iterations. And that's where he was brilliant. I mean, there's that bit in Relax where after many loops around the end, the lyric is, relax, don't do it. When you come to relax, don't do it. Relax.
Yeah.
And everywhere you used to go, everybody would sing into the gap, and then you get the payoff.
Yeah.
And that was one of his masterstrokes. It was just build these things.
Yeah.
And change the shapes throughout, and then sweep it all away and do it again. And that was a prime example. He used to call them gags. He said, "This is the gag. This is the gag, guys. We need a gag," and that was the gag.
Yeah.
And of course, it had the required effect.
Sure. So let's rewind a couple of years or so. Art of Noise. So you've come up with this stuff with Gary with the drums, and Trevor's heard this and said, right, let's get Anne in, and Trevor's producing it. Paul, I guess, is obviously hanging around. He sees the opportunity of having a house band, and Chris Blackwell insists that this is the first release on the new ZTT label, which he's helping obviously with Ireland. Takes it across apparently to New York and plays it out in a club.
Allegedly.
Yeah, and it just goes down a storm. And I actually wrote an article for my website some years ago about how these kind of these guys from England kind of heavily influenced the hip hop scene over in America. It was just like a bizarre concept, but it's what happened. So the genesis of the art of noise. I mean, what was your inspiration for that? You know, where did you just see it as like a side thing, something that you were doing as well as the production work, or was it a concerted effort to be a band? Because obviously, you know, you showed us the mask earlier. Nobody really knew who was in the band because nobody could see, even on stage. You know, when you made some, you know, brief stage appearances in the early days, certainly, you know, you all had masks on, or, you know, Anne had the clown outfits and stuff on. You know, so you know, was it just like was it like a side hustle for you in terms of what?
Side hustle?
Yeah, that's the terminology the kids use these days, isn't it? Yeah.
Is that like a hole through, or what do you call that thing?
No, yeah, through hole. Yeah.
Is this synth speak? Am I missing out?
Well, no. I mean, what I'm trying to say is, you know, you've been involved in the production of a number of, you know, some great albums and working as a session guy and a freelance programmer, and then all of a sudden you're part of this revolutionary band that is kind of rejuvenating music concrete, if you will, in a way, using the Fairlight as the kind of the centerpiece. And I was just wondering, you know, how seriously you took art of noise as a career choice against, you know, all the other stuff that you were doing at the time.
Wow, that's a hell of a. I mean,
sorry, I'm trying to cram as much in before.
No, there are many elements of this. Robin.
Sure.
One of them is produced by Trevor Horn.
Well, yes.
I'll make really no comment about that whatsoever, other than say, moving on.
Okay.
One of the things you should, talking about Gary just for a second, Moments in Love, for example, in that he recorded different delays on the snare and stuff, and recorded the different delays, and then played them in the mix, unmuted them, muted them. Brilliant. So if you wanted to program that stuff, it's just madness. And we got hold of the digital strip outs, and it was going, wow, you know, delay, no delay, pre-delay, long delay, and it's just like, wow, God. And he said, well, I was just playing with it. So that all added to the shape. In terms of, don't get me wrong, I think a lot of your comments just now are kind of with the benefit of hindsight and post-factum reductionism.
Yes.
By which I mean that at the time when we were doing it, we had no idea what it was we were doing, other than that we had an atmosphere. It was a lot of fun. And a lot of the sounds that we were using, I had sampled, and no one would play them on their music. Trevor would get close. Mm-hmm. So the car start, for example.
Yeah.
The reverse of that car start is on the beginning of Ferry Across the Mersey.
Okay.
Yeah. And Trevor was into that because it was a gimmick, and it cost him, you know, many squillions of pounds to hire me and buy the gear. So he wanted to use it. But I would go on these sessions, and no one would get this. They wouldn't understand what this was, because Trevor's thing was the gag. What was the gag? How could the Fairlight bring a gag? Interestingly, when Liverpool were playing Everton last season, bizarrely, I was watching BBC, and they played the very first section of Frankie's Ferry Across the Mersey, and I instantly recognised that sound. Instantly. It was bizarre. Let's talk sonics just for a second. One of the reasons that sound, that car start, was so amazing, I've realised, is that I recorded it outside where I was living in Highgate at the time, in a kind of wood. Mm-hmm. And when my neighbour came out and stalled her car and restarted the car, and I recorded it and later chopped it up and sampled it, one of the things that made it so awesome was the fact that there must have been 500 micro reflections from all these trees.
Yeah.
And so rather than using one delay, you know, or two or something, or like Centre Court has thousands of delays. So before they put the roof on, it's a completely different sound to when it's open.
Yeah.
And it's different to how it was before they put the roof on, sonically. Mm-hmm. And it's to do with all the micro reflections that are going around the whole thing. And so that particular sound benefited from being in that environment
Yeah.
I didn't understand it at the time. I kind of went, "Whoa, that's pretty cool." But that was an interesting aspect, and then Gary started messing with that. What was the other part of your question? Sorry.
Oh,
yes.
yeah.
was it? Okay, so it was a bit of an exploration because I had all these sounds, and I've been working with Gary on and off with Trevor and all that, and we knew that there was a lot we could do with the Fairlight that no one else was doing, or even had a concept of how we might do it. And then the loop idea came up, and the drum sound idea came up. And most of the sessions I did with other people didn't involve creating backing tracks, or if they did, they were quite sterile, not sterile, but they're quite formulaic. Put the Fairlight down, and thanks JJ and bye. We used to have terrible times syncing everything up. Oh my God. They used to have a timecode track, obviously track 24, and then they brought up this box along, SRC I think it was, that read timecode.
Yeah, the friendship, yeah.
Saved everyone's life. But then you'd find that people would start, and you'd have to lay down a different code for all the different synths. Do you remember that?
Yeah, well, I'm vaguely familiar with it, yeah.
Oh my God. You'd have 3 tracks of tone, and then people who didn't know what they were doing would start the tape at 0 and run the tone at 0. And so you go, but there's no hookup time. And they go, what do you mean? It's like, well, it takes a second or two for everything to lurch into action.
Yeah.
To go, oh, I'm here, here's one, off we go. And a number of times you had problems getting everything to sync. It was a nightmare. Not as bad as Steve Howe going off to record guitars on the Yes album, 90125, in another studio, and then bringing the tapes back, and Gary trying to comp the 24 track and put it as a stereo mix on the master, to discover that the slave that they'd been recording was running at the wrong speed.
Oh no.
So there's a thing for the guitarist amongst you. Think about that for a second.
Yeah.
And many hours of Steve Howe, ever so slightly out of time and tune, with no known technology for fixing it. Yeah. So the Art of Noise, well, it was Chris Blackwell basically who's to blame for that, and took it across, and we shot up the black urban dance charts. We were number 1.
Yeah.
And I remember I was shopping in Windsor of all places, got into the car, and my girlfriend said, "Isn't that your music?" I went, "What?" She said, "Turn it up." And I went, "Oh yeah, bloody hell!" It was Paul Gambaccini going, number 1 in the black urban dance charts, and I went, "Crikey!"
Wow.
Had no idea. And then Trevor goes, "Oh yeah, Cryss said he wanted to put something out, so he put it out." What? Oh, better sign a publishing deal. I won't go into that, but 37 years later.
Yeah. Yes, I can imagine. The stories are numerous, I think, with the whole ZTT roster.
So
they are legion.
Yes.
And I am one of the legionnaires.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to say.
No. Cryss, you wanted to...
Yeah. Let me go in a slightly different direction, and then I got 2 follow-ups from Simon, who's also a big fan, and I want to make sure I get to that. You said back in 1988, there's too much marketing now. People should go back and use their ears and listen to what really matters. And that's 1988. So my question is, what really matters to you in regards to music, and has that changed over the last 33 years?
Wow. Did I say that? If I did
you
say
did.
That was brilliant, because basically, if I may say so, because the voice is about people with their backs to singers listening. TV program, hurrah! Listen to the singers, don't watch them. Trevor made a point of never watching singers. Because he said, when you listen to something, you don't see them, and you can get fooled by a good vocal if the guy or the woman is giving it loads, physically, and you got to listen to the whole thing. So, I still like the same things. I was listening to the first albums I ever bought the other day, which happened to be the Daniel Barenboim Otto Klemperer Beethoven piano concertos. Now, Ludwig, he's your man. I'm just... Wow, still. And absolutely. I used to go to the Albert Hall quite a lot when we lived in London, and was able to see Barenboim, and if you ever get a chance, and he's still conducting, he's extraordinary, and he's got this East-West Divan Orchestra, who are Palestinians and Israelis,
right?
And they're amazing, and he's amazing. So that has been a constant. Beethoven, I've always just Bach, and I was going to say Beethoven and Bach, and I think they were quite mathematical in their approach to music, as I understand it. And so that I kind of connect with that in terms of the way they would iterate tunes and melodies and pass them around orchestras and stuff. So that's been a constant. In terms of what I like listening to and what gets me going, it's basically anything that's got a decent melody or an atmosphere, or preferably both. Big fan of Lorne Balfe, so I think his stuff on the television is fantastic.
It is, yeah.
It's just he's got that thing that we talked about, the glassiness, but also the creating big sounds without them being big. You know, yeah. I don't know how you do that, and that's just very impressive. And so, yeah, anything that I saw some guys living in Northampton a couple of years back, and they were really, really interesting. But and they'd obviously, it wasn't my stuff, and I wouldn't go out and buy it. But you could tell that they had worked on it and they knew what it was they were doing and how they were trying to do it. And his guitarist and diddler diddler diddler, and he played quite quietly, which is nice. So that was anything. I think you have to. The voice is it, really, isn't it? They don't watch the performers; they listen to them. And I remember when we worked with Sir Tom, beg your pardon. Mark, his son, was managing him, and he was going. They were talking about something, and Mark goes, "Oh, Tom, the one that goes blah 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 blah." And I went, "Bloody hell, he can sing as well." And they both got extraordinary voices. And he did Kiss the other day, on the show. And it sounds amazing. And we went to see him in Northampton about 3 years ago, and he's got that big band of his, about a 9-piece band. And we were about 5 rows back in the middle, and it sounded incredible. It was really, really good. And all played. Yeah. First 5 minutes, it was just the band playing. And Rosie said, "Where's Tom? Where's Tom?" I said, "They're getting the balance. They're sorting everything out. He'll be on." And it sounded amazing. They did, what did they do? I Saw the Knife. What's that tune? I Saw the Knife in My Hand. Tom Just John. Delilah.
Yeah.
So the two guitarists come out, and they get their acoustics, and they're going bam 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 bam, and going, "Well, this is familiar. What's this?" And I suddenly realised it's Delilah, and they're doing it as a flamenco.
Oh wow! Oh,
unbelievable!
Yeah. And
then halfway through, it goes bang, and it chops back into the original arrangement. Fantastic. So melody, harmony, structure, having a gag. That was a great gag.
Yeah.
And the other tune I liked of his, what was it I heard the other day? The Tower of Song, Leonard Cohen.
Not familiar with that.
Okay, check it out. It was on album or so, two albums ago.
Okay.
It's a Leonard Cohen tune called Tower of Song, and Tom did a version of it, and I heard it live first, and at the end of it I was going, wow, I feel really quite weepy. I don't understand it. It's a very emotional song. It's all about dying, basically, and being a songwriter, and being the end of your life and all that sort of stuff. Very, very powerful. So yeah, throughout has been the consistent search for harmony, melody, and structure.
A couple of quick questions from Simon, who's one of our friends and is a regular on the show, and he was very excited that you were going to be on. First question, real quick: did you get your Series 3 before Andy Richards?
Oh yeah, Andy Richards. Andy Richards, I've got a Jupiter 8. Why do I need a Fairlight? Well, he had his PPG, and I think that's sampled as well. So yeah, definitely. And when we were working with Pete Collins, Andy had his PP. Andy had a rig. It was quite a big rig. And I had my Fairlight, and we worked together on that. Yeah, no, long before.
So Simon's also a Fairlight owner, and maybe got it a bit later, but he wanted to know what was it like writing a check for £60,000 for your Series 3 back in the day?
Oh. I'm not sure how I should answer this.
Well, I'm sure it must have felt
Did you
like
write the check?
Quite a large risk.
Was there a check?
Well, I think I phoned my bank manager. In those days, you had a relationship manager, and you had a branch. One of my accounts, by the way, has the same digit for all but one of the numbers, right?
Right.
And people say, how the hell do you get a number like that? In the old days, folks, you used to go into a bank and they'd have a ledger.
Yeah.
And they go, what number would you like? So he gave me this number. And so I remember I phoned him up. His name was Derek. And I said, I need some more money. And he went, how much? What for? Blah, 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 blah. He said, okay. And he phoned me back about 2 hours later and said, yeah, when do you want it? I said, next week. He said, no problem. And that was how business was done back in the day.
Wow.
I didn't really think it was a risk.
It's a tool, isn't it? It's like a carpenter going out and buying, a set of saws and chisels or whatever it is that's carpenters use.
I tell you what it reminds me of. Everybody in the UK probably watches that Grand Designs thing where they talk about, Kevin talks about people building these amazing houses.
Yes.
And a family got one of those timber frame houses from the States. Mm-hmm. And they got a plot of land and they were building this thing. And the guy comes over from the States and it's a big house. And he's going, well, it's a bit slow, guys. Should have finished it by now. And they go, oh, well, we're hammering away. Got 10 guys on, hammering away. And he goes, what are you using? They go, well, we're using hammers. And he gets his nail gun out, right? He goes, patunk, 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 patunk. He said, you need one of these. So the series, the Fairlights were like that. You don't want to do it with a hammer. You want something that will just go bam, really fast. And that was the other thing about the whole process was that in the commercial world in which we lived, there is a pursuit for some form of perfection. And in terms of economics, and I'm going to digress here just for a minute,
sure, is
that in the pursuit for the reduced costs of production and in an attempt to maximize profit, there are two ways you can do this. One of them is through automation, which is computers and all that stuff. Get rid of drummers, for example, in effect. Or cheap labor. So you have 10 drummers who are also cheap and who can play, or you get a machine, which is a model that the Chinese have taken to heart, I think. They have the 10 drummers who are also very efficient. And it must come as no surprise to everybody out there that the Chinese are where they are, because basically in that relentless pursuit of profit, they've gone, well, we've got cheap labor, we can do it for you. Anyway, that economics over. Sorry.
No, quite. I'm conscious of the time because there's some. I want to sort of talk about some more up to date things as well.
Yeah.
Guys, have you got anything else you want to throw in before we move on a little bit?
Well, let me ask this. This will be quick because you're known for using a very particular instrument, and I'm sure it would be a mistake to say. This music is great because it used a Fairlight or a Jupiter or anything like that. What has been your strategy when approaching such instruments to make it for your music to be interesting, to be good, to be valuable? What is your strategy about using whatever it is that you're using?
That's simple. The rather like my example of sampling the Frankie's Going Come and changing the start. Mm-hmm. It was to create something that people hadn't heard before and make it unique. And so in your world, it would be doing something different with a VCA, changing the oscillator, plugging in some other thing that someone else won't have done. Right. And so right at the beginning, I was thinking there's no point in putting musical instruments in the Fairlight because it sounds terrible.
Well, this is like what you were talking about with Paul McCartney, right?
Yeah.
Like,
It
why
was-
do this as an orchestra when you can do something original?
Exactly that. And so, it's always been the thing. I mean, Trevor was doing it with his Linn drum and just detuning the bass drum. Just it made a difference, And so the idea being, I suppose, that in an audio landscape, you're trying to create those little earworms or whatever you call it that connect with people. In art, in anything, music, theatre, cinema, you're always, as an audience, you sit there and at some point or other you get grabbed by whatever it is, and you become part of it, and you become involved in it, you become invested in it, and it's something that I don't understand how that happens. The great filmmakers that do it, I don't know how, and it's the same process. So that you're trying to create an atmosphere. Instruments of Darkness, for example, one of my favourite Art of Noise tunes, was about creating an atmosphere. It was purely atmosphere driven, totally. Let's create something dark. We got this, we got that. This is the foundation of how that works. So it was all about trying to formulate something, and it wouldn't necessarily be, it's got to be the Fairlight. It's got to be this, it's got to be that. I'm really interested in this Behringer stuff. I'm thinking, ooh, this could be good. Because it might give us that thing that I think we're missing in our shows, which is the low subs. And so it's always a matter of going, what can we use? How can we do something that's unusual, that either amuses us or annoys us? I think provoking, prodding. Malcolm was a prodder. That was the thing we got from Malcolm. Prodding, provoking. If you sit there and go, you do something anodyne, you go, well, yeah, so what? Yeah. Why bother?
Quite absolutely.
Everybody could, It's like when the DX7 came out. What a ghastly instrument that is. I mean, I'm sorry. What a terrible, terrible, terrible. What was it? FM synthesis? Oh God, fizz and pop, just rubbish. Absolutely rubbish.
Can somebody please sample this on a Fairlight and send it to Robbie?
Sorry,
sorry, Robert. Yeah,
DX7s, DX5s, DX11s.
Oh man,
it's my other obsession.
You only need one. It's all fizz, pop, and bump. Oh, what a load of nonsense! Oh man, I hate them.
Oh no.
I mean, I tell
they
you,
say never meet your heroes.
Yeah, Robbie's going to cry himself to sleep now.
I can tell you the number of sessions I went to when
isn't happy either.
Keyboard players I got this great new thing. It's a DX7, and you go, oh shit. And you go, I got this great marimba sound. You go, oh no, not again. And then you go, oh, has it got strings, right? Just to sort of prod to Malcolm McLaren. You go, yeah, and you go, oh God, no. And basically, if you're slightly deaf, it all sounds exactly the same. I mean, you should listen to them, Robbie. Sorry, but you take out some of the characteristics, and they're just ghastly. Oh, sorry. I'm not a fan.
Heartbroken.
Not a fan of DX7s.
No, it's fine.
It was like the Cocoa Pops of cereal. I don't know what they are in America, but they're kind of sugar.
Yeah.
You look at a Kellogg's packet, an old retro Kellogg's packet, and they were trying to sugarify breakfast, right? Yeah. Rice Krispies, any of those things. It's all sugar. Eat this with sugar. A DX7. Yeah? You want to remember? It's an extra bit of sugar, DX7. You want strings, bit of sugar. It was just like, oh, man. Anyway, sorry.
No, absolutely fine. I'm not.
What's wrong with a Selena? That's what I want to know.
No, quite. So let's just bring this because
you invited me on.
I did, and I still need to ask you about. Alexa. So I've got to apologise first of all. There's loads of questions been coming up in the chat, and I'm not sure if we've managed to ask them. One was, what is the most complex track? I think this was Kevin Whitehouse. I'm assuming this is Kevin Whitehouse, who runs the Art of Noise online pages and groups.
And he does a fantastic job.
Awesome job.
Awesome. Seriously.
Yeah, if it is you, Kevin, hello. What was the most complex Art of Noise track that involved the Fairlight?
Well, they all involved the Fairlight at one point or another, even if it's just putting down two tracks.
Mm-hmm.
Complex. I think sonically, probably. Moments in Love.
Yeah.
That was quite hard work. Making that thing 9 minutes long. That was the opening thing of that. I said, let's make it 9 minutes long. Because we didn't have a name.
Right.
Morley came up with a name.
He was good at that.
Let's just make it long. And that was it's complex because it's complex because it's not an 8-bar loop. Okay.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is exactly because there were many iterations and many edits, but it was 9 minutes long. We never managed to cut it down to a point where it worked, shorter than that. And there are some 8-bar sections in there, but essentially it's a 9-bar loop.
Right.
So that all the stop bars, where all the now bits and all that sort of business, I said, let's provoke, let's push, let's do the Malcolm thing, let's make it long. And let's not do 8 bars, let's do 9 bars. And that changed the whole thing because basically you had a bar where you could do any amount of nonsense with, change key, put noises in, break it all down, start again. And it was like a liberating thing to go, oh, we could just go click, 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 click. Oh, well, we've done that. What are we going to do next time? And so that was it. Trying to map it all out. I used to have coloured pens.
Right.
Trying to figure out where everything was. Gary had a pretty good handle, and Anne kind of knew. She did say to us once when we were rehearsing before we went to Japan, she said, I'd like to remind both of you, neither of you are keyboard players.
Subtle. Talking of Japan, so coming out on the 6th of August.
Oh, good link, yeah.
Yes, that one just fell in my lap and I was going to go for it. So coming out on the 6th of August is this new release of Art of Noise in the City, live in Tokyo, 1986, as I desperately look for the link to share on the screen at the same time as I'm talking about it, and it won't show up. Where are we? There it is.
Mixed by Gary.
Yes, so this is kind of like a proper nice release. So this is the artofnoiseonline.com, which we were talking about, that Kevin does so marvellously well. So it's coming out on double white vinyl, CD and digital. Can you tell us anything about this? You say it's been remastered or remixed by Gary?
Yeah, by Gary. So it was when we were in Japan. Gary wasn't there originally. And it was recorded. I don't know who or when or how, but it popped up. And Ian Peel said,
oh, yes.
Let's re-release this. Gary can remix it. Yeah, there it is. And I think because we were back in Japan in 2017 or was it 2018? I can't remember. And we did 4 shows, and there were people who came with their original tickets and their original brochures for the tour from 1986.
Wow.
It was amazing. Absolutely amazing. Extraordinary.
Really quick, with that tour, Sasquatch had asked a question about that. He said, how much of the gig at Sound Cindy Liverpool, May 2017, was sequenced and how much was live?
Yes, very good question. What a very good question that is. You'll have seen there was a Fairlight on stage, but basically...
James is Fairlight.
Yeah, James, that's right. What happened was, because we put a whole load of subs and stuff and new bass on the tracks, and they had these vast bass bins. I mean, they're bigger than my house. Basically, the Fairlight stopped working almost immediately and started humming. And Roger Dudley was out front of house, and he just hit the mute button and occasionally checked it, and I think it just hummed the entire time. James would probably know better. But the answer is yes.
Very diplomatic.
I was going to ask a similar question. Sorry, it's just like when you came up with these recordings and that, and then you decided to take it out live. Back in the 80s, how much of a challenge was that compared to redoing it again more recently?
In the 80s, we had a guy called Paul Robinson who played drums, and had a Roland drum kit with a couple of Ackli samplers, one of which turned up in New Zealand a few years back. And Anne wrote out all the dots.
Wow.
And I remember going into rehearsals, and she'd been working with Paul, and he had all the sounds set up. And it was like listening to the track. It was like, oh my God. He was just reading it and playing it. And I had a look at the dots, and it was like unbelievable. There's just, these dots, bass drum, snare drum. Okay, I get that, I understand that. But then all these other bits and squilly I said, what are these boys? I said, I have no idea, just hit them, and it would be wee or piddly buddly biddly buddly. I just hit them, and after a while, I know what they are. So that was great. And Dave Bronze was playing bass, and Dave used to go off and then played with Clapton and played with Tom Jones and all that. So a guy, who can really play, reads his music. He had a sampler bass as well. Mm-hmm. So he was doing all that, and was playing proper keyboards. We had a percussionist, and we had the noisettes, who are the interest factor, and me, and I played the odd note here and there, wrongly, on occasion. But interestingly, we had some instances in America where the crowd would go completely mad, and I kind of figuring out what on earth was going on until I realised that Katie, one of the singers, used to wear this full-length rubber dress. And it used to wriggle up, right? Her legs. Not in a revealing way or anything like that. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't anything. But she'd bend down and wiggle it down again. And all the young boys in the audience went mad. And I go, well, it can't be beatbox that's doing it. And I spotted it one night doing it. And I went, keep doing that. It all starts to flag. Just, wriggle down your clothing a bit. That's probably terribly sexist. But it was true.
It's working.
and I'm afraid it was true. I don't know how politically correct any of this is.
Oh, I wouldn't worry too much about that. I wanted to bring this to your attention. Sorry, my screen's just decided to do a bit of a brain fart there. Here we go. Right. So are you aware, JJ, of a piece of software that came out fairly recently? I know that you've used the Arturia plugin, but a friend of mine has developed a piece of software called Quasar Beach, which is a recreation of the Fairlight's basically the operating system and the functionality. It's literally built from the ground up. It's not a reworking of it at all. And I'm just going to try and bring the screen in here. So it's this thing here. It's a guy called Jean-Luc, or who goes by the name of Adam Strange. And it's this kind of recreation of the CMI's functionality, just running on a Mac.
Who needs more than 8 tracks? Can I just say
quite.
That?
Yeah, quite. Exactly. But are you aware of this at all? Because he sent me an email today. He said, I can't make the show live, but could I say the following to you? So I'm going to honour that, because he's a fantastic job here. And as I say that, I've lost his email. Here it is. So I won't be live with you tonight, but I'll drop a quick line for JJ. Please tell him that this application would not exist without his ghostly presence, both behind me and playing on the stereo. His involvement with the Fairlight has been totally inspirational, and it was for people such as him that I created this software. My many thanks to him and others in the Fairlight community for everything that has guided and influenced me, as in him. So the impact that you have had on people's lives is pretty massive, I would say.
So is this a Windows platform, or is it
Windows, Mac and Linux, and it's completely free to download, and I'll send you a link.
Please do.
Yeah, and it's I mean, I've helped him with this. I say helped. He's just sent me it and said, compare it to the real thing, and I have, and it's almost indistinguishable in terms of the functionality. Right. He's also, as you can see in this screenshot here, he's added in some of the Series 3 functionality at the bottom with the buttons, the function button markings. But it's a great thing, and anybody else that's watching, if you haven't discovered this yet, please do go and download it. It's completely free, although a donation would be.
Does it have it's got a sequencer in it as well, right?
Yep, PageR. It works exactly like PageR used to, with all of its quirks. And
it's just reminded me of one of the software iterations of the Fairlight. You used to be able to sign the start point to a fader.
Yep.
And it went, I think, which I was very annoyed about. But it meant that one of my tricks was to put a sound into an 8th note sequence and then start playing it, and then push the fader backwards and forwards through the start point.
Right, yes.
So you get this timed thing, and I'd be able to choose in a random sort of way where the sound started. And then when it went into a kind of spinny loop, it was a lot of fun. No, that's interesting. That's really interesting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he has spent a huge amount of time developing this. He actually took so sonically, it doesn't recreate the internals of a Fairlight, because obviously that's quite an extensive thing to do. But from a software and operating system functionality level, it's almost identical, and has done some amazing things. So he's even recreated the help files as well, which is quite stunning. He's
got that green out of black as well, which I always love.
Yeah,
it's so distinctive.
Yes, exactly. And yeah, I mean, it's just a great thing. So I promised him I'd read that out and share that with you. So there you go.
That's great.
What's in the future for the art of what or whatever? Because there's also the art of silence. Is that still something you do?
Well, the art of silence. Ian's found all these tapes.
Yeah.
And has decided it's a good idea to put them out again.
Awesome.
So, yeah, that's a bit of an interesting escapade for me, because that wasn't a terribly happy moment, all of that, because basically did the album and the record company went under, owing a lot of money, and caused me to end my relationship with making money. Ha! Yeah, did that.
There's a Freudian slip.
It did that, that's for sure. Making music, out of the same bin of memory, memory recall failure 404, money, music. So I stopped after that, and just left all the tapes, got the CDs and everything. And it wasn't until Ian started chivying me and going, "Come on, I've heard some of this stuff. It's good. Do you want to do it? I go, okay, if you must, because it wasn't a great moment.
Sure.
All of that, but in terms of the art of noise, will not play again.
Mm-hmm.
But the art of what live on.
Excellent.
And the art of what is me and Gary, and we have Donal Hodgson, who does the tech side on one side of the stage, and on the other side, Ian Peel is there, and he's scratching videos for us.
Brilliant.
So I don't know if anyone's seen any of the shows, but they're actually turning out quite well, better than I anticipated them to be.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as you well know, I was supposed to. You very graciously invited me to come up to the Liverpool gig a few years ago, and then, if you might recall, my car broke down.
Yes.
On the way there, and that was it. And so I missed that show, because I was looking forward to seeing, you on stage with a real Fairlight again. Was going to be just, kind of a box ticking moment. But I look forward to hopefully coming and see you and Gary. Will Anne ever feature again in any of that?
Probably not.
No. Okay, we'll leave that there then.
So anyway, she said to me and Gary, neither of you are keyboard players. And it upset Gary, but it's true. And so later on in the rehearsal, she stops and goes, JJ, in that 8 bars there, you didn't play what you played before. And I went, no, Anne. As you have so rightly pointed out, I am not a keyboard player. Okay? I said, you count me in, and you count me out, and whatever you get is what you get. She said, fair point, fair point.
Yeah.
She turns up to rehearsals and gets her notes out and just sits down and plays.
Well, yes.
She's, exactly.
Yeah.
Gary and I are going, what were we doing? What was it? Yeah. But that was why it worked so well, was that you had this wonderful tonality on top of all this madness, And it was mad. Machine guns and stuff,
Yeah.
Come and go, you created this thing in F-7, you go, really? You go, no, how about this? And you play this lovely chord, you go, ooh, I like that. Like that. And then put these lovely chords over this craziness,
Yeah. There's a very popular, or there was a very popular Laserdisc of a live performance. Was it The Invisible Silence?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know if that's ever going to see the light of day in a modern format? Is that something Ian has been able to dig out?
I think Ian's trying to find it.
Yeah.
Mike Mansfield directed it.
Right.
It was the Hammersmith Odeon.
Yes.
I was involved in the editing. All the really gruesome bits are me.
Yeah.
The chopping meat, which was crazy. That was Malcolm manifesting himself again.
Yeah.
This is boring. Do something crazy. So I don't know. It'd be good if it did.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of clamouring for it, within the fan base.
Yeah, but do you know what? It's a rights thing.
Yeah.
God, you have to clear all this stuff these days. And my God, what a nightmare.
Yeah, something similar happened with the Pet Shop Boys with their It Couldn't Happen Here movie, that it was like one company owned the rights at the outset when it was made, and then over the years that company gets bought by this company, and then it gets pushed out over here, and then loads of people have got fingers in the pie, and it's trying to get them all to agree to it.
And there's a lot of people who are sitting kind of in the middle who have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, quite.
No idea. Sadly. It was a long time ago.
Yes, it was. But what a time. What a time.
Indeed.
Guys, have you got anything else that you'd like to put to
Any
JJ?
other questions from the great, wonderful Wobbly Web who
Well, somebody in the chat room really early on asked who did the artwork for all the Art of Noise stuff, and I've been tracking back and I can't get that far back in the conversation to see who asked it.
Excellent design.
That's a good one. I don't know. I think when we were at Chrysalis, it was John Pash.
Right.
Early on, obviously, Into Battle was derived from a Dave Brubeck cover.
Yeah,
I think.
And the Ghent altarpiece. And
yes, people know about these things. I mean, we just went, wow, Paul, that's great.
But wasn't the ZTT stuff mostly like Tom Watkins and XL Design?
Yeah, could have been. I don't know how much they're involved in that. But interestingly, I was talking to a guy I was at school with, and Andrew, and we worked out that we were both in the Chrysalis building at about the same time. And he was a graphic designer, but working on other stuff. And he did the arranged and designed all those beds on the beach for the Pink Floyd album.
Right.
Right. And he was in the same building, and we didn't know that we knew each other at the time, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Until about 20 years later, and you were that. Went, oh yeah, well I was in the next room. It was kind of odd. But the artwork, no, I loved it all. I thought it was great. But certainly Chrysalis, it's John Pash.
Yeah. One final question from the chat room, because I know Synth Addict is kind of repeatedly posting it because we keep missing it. What is one of your favourite Fairlight happy accident sounds, and where was it used?
Oh, the car start. No doubt about it. I mean, I went to record some horses, and the car came out and stalled, and it wasn't until I was editing the tape that I realised I had a really cracking sound.
And was it really a VW Golf convertible?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. And the start and the stall, the restart, a complete fluke. But I would say in my defence, it was recognising when I heard it going, wow, that's pretty good. I used to work with a drum. I used to sit on a drum stool, right, and doing my sampling. I did my 100,000 hours and all that. And I'd edit up the Akai quarter-inch analog tape. Oh, God, you've got to do all that stuff to appreciate the gruesomeness of it all. And went to make a cup of tea, put the tape down, came back to my room where I was working, and I'd put the reel of tape on the drum stool. And everyone knows about drum stools. They're round.
Yep.
And the tape unravelled.
No.
The whole lot.
Oh, God.
I spent the rest of the day winding it back on the spool. Let me tell you. That was the mistake you only make once.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ghastly. No, but the car start, that was your
happiest accident, yeah.
Yeah, amazing.
There's, sorry, I know we're moving on, but I do want to try and get as many people's questions in. This one's interesting. So, you released a while back a sample CD called The Art of Sampling, which I believe is still currently available on the AMG website as a digital download.
Is it?
Yeah. Where are we?
Chase up my royalties then.
Yes,
Yeah.
I've got Matt's emails. If you want to, I can put you in touch. But he's. To be fair, he religiously defends that it does. People do start sharing these things as they do online, and he does clamp down on those people. But there you go. What was was this just one of these projects that somebody came to you and said, look, you're very famous for your samples. Very famous for your sampling. Can you put a collection together, or was this what was the thinking behind doing this?
Wow. I have no idea. Desperation, probably.
Yeah.
Tom Jones's Flies on there.
Tom Jones's Flies? What? Oh, yes.
Oh, the Zip.
Yeah.
Is it after that? I don't know.
I think, it must have been, yeah.
I don't know. I think he bought me out, to be honest. He offered me a deal I couldn't refuse or understand. So
Oh, I see.
one of those. Alexa.
Yes, tell us your Alexa story. Go for it.
So I was with friends over lunch who I don't see very regularly at school with this guy called Moose. And he said, oh, we had some weird things happening. They have lots of animals and stuff. They live on a farm. And they kept being woken up at 1 o'clock in the morning by living on a prayer, right? Playing very loud in the kitchen. And it wasn't until one day they hear the parrot go, Alexa, play Bon Jovi. Swear to God, this is true. And
wow.
He said, oh, this parrot's ridiculous. He said, phone my phone. So I phoned him, and the parrot goes, hello. So, yeah, Alexa, play Bon Jovi. I said, so what have you done? He said, oh, we renamed it Computer. And the parrot has not twigged. It's now called Computer. I mean, how weird is that?
That's brilliant.
I mean,
awesome.
That's my Alexa story.
Fantastic. No, that was, and what a note to end on. And we must end it there.
Bon Jovi, yes, sorry. Yeah. No. So when I lived in Oxford, I went to the Union, and John Bon Jovi was talking there because he was a guest. Yes. And he said, some of the passing comment. He said some of the biggest criminals on the planet, record company executives. And at the end, I'm the oldest guy in there by about 50 years, and I go, oh, Mr. Jovi, during your speech, you said that I think you said that record company executives are the biggest criminals on the planet. He said, yep. And I said, so would you care to elaborate? And he went, no, next question.
Oh, do you know, I said earlier on the show you should never meet your heroes when you took the Mickey out of my beloved DX7, but I'm glad.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine.
It's Mickey. I just don't bloody like them.
No, that's fine. And you have every right not to, and lots of other people do too.
I don't have to live with them. I don't have three of them stashed behind me.
I know, sorry. But
if I need a DX7, Robbie, I know where to come.
You know where to come. Absolutely. JJ, thank you so much. I mean, it's been a real pleasure, and we can sit here and talk for hours.
Good God, it's cool.
Yeah, I'm conscious of the time.
So, and it's been an absolute pleasure.
No, it's for us. It has just been an absolute joy, and listening to the stories. As you probably know, I'm a huge fan of you and Art of Noise and the whole ZTT thing and everything that you've ever done. It really has formed a basis for a lot of what I do musically, and I love music. So I cannot thank you enough for coming on the show.
I hope. Look, I mean, I may come across as being somewhat flippant, but at the end of the day, it was always a serious operation when we did all that stuff, and there was always some element of focus, and I think it goes without saying, if I may be so bold, that our stuff is well crafted, and so. That alone indicates the level of kind of effort we used to put in. It wasn't kind of just splattered against the wall, because it's tricky.
It's perfect though, isn't it? It's pretty, when you listen to it, it's a perfect product. Yeah. So that effort.
Well, that's very kind of you to say so. It never felt like that at the time. You know what it's like. You know what it's like when you create anything, though. You're always going, oh, never really like that bit. That's dodgy. You like it? You sure? And you go, no, that's a bit. Oh, I never liked that bit. It's always been a bit out of tune. There's always something. It's the artist mentality. You're focusing on the wrong bits. I was playing golf. I was thinking on all the shots I hit badly, not the shots I hit well. You've got to change your focus,
Yeah, absolutely.
We put a lot of, and I suppose that really bears witness to the fact that stuff is still being played everywhere.
Definitely.
By virtue of the fact that it kind of. It worked.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been a kind of an inspiration. So many people cite Art of Noise as an inspiration, or things that inspired them to either get into music or to make the sort of music that they make. So yeah, it's
I was inspired by Ludwig. So it's a ongoing cadence.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we all that kind of iteration goes around and goes across generations, and it's picking up that energy, and it's kind of finding that thing that gets you going. There's those things, what gets you going, and it might be in your case, not in mine. But I acknowledge the fact that you feel, bonded to that selection of keys and noises.
Look, first and foremost, I'm one of these fans.
Yeah, no.
Exactly. Anyway, of course, if you ever need Fairlights, just give us a call.
May well do.
Yeah. Listen, will you come on again? If we ask you, would you? We'd love to have you on again.
Of course.
Yeah, he's already insulted DX7s and guitarists, so he's going to have to come back to insult Ben.
Yeah, we'll give something to
Fat ball blokes. That's what you've got to work on next.
Yeah, bad tasting jackets.
There's no, yes, thank you.
Brilliant. Well, we'll be in touch. Absolutely.
You've been very kind and understanding, Dave.
No, you've been incredibly generous with your time and your wonderful stories. We really, really appreciate it.
Well, there are too many more. Let me tell you.
Well, this is why we want you on again. We have part 2. We'll do part 2.
Yeah, part 2.
Brilliant. Thank you, JJ. If I can just say thank you to everybody that's been in the chat room, that's been watching, whether you've been contributing to the discussion, asking questions. I'm so sorry if we missed your question. Time just flies by, and we can't get everything in. But please save them, because we'll get JJ back on again, and we'll talk more, and maybe we can ask the questions.
Yeah, I mean, if you get your act together.
Yeah, do it properly.
You can have them listed, right?
Yeah,
and you can have them stuck to your DX7. You just look round and go, "Oh yeah, here's this email I've got from Dave."
Yes,
he
indeed.
wants to know why do you hate the DX7 so much?
Oh dear.
I'm sorry, I don't like the DX7.
No, you don't. Don't lie. Don't lie. My feelings are already hurt. If I can just say, we will be back same time next week, and hopefully next week's guest won't be so as insulting about the DX7. We're going to be joined next week by this guy, Simon Glenister, who, as I said before, again, is a name you probably don't know, but he does some amazing work with music technology and young people, and getting their confidence going and their creativity going through synthesis and electronic music, and just music in general, basically. So we're going to be talking to him next week, and I'm just going to bring up the timetable of guests. So after that, because we've got a few good ones here. So yeah, the week after that, I'm away again doing Record Store Day, so I might join in from a live, from a queue somewhere in the middle of Suffolk. And Dominic Hawken will be standing in for me on that show. He's going to be the guest and the star, shall we say. But the week after that, we've got Jim Danica coming on. Jim is a keyboard player, musical director in the US, and has done some wonderful work with Mainstage and creating sound banks for use with that, and he also loves his DXs. So unfortunately, I won't be here for that show either, because I'm going to see China Crisis play live. It'll be the first live gig since, I don't know, beginning of 2020, I think. Actually, no, the end of 2019. So yeah, we got him on July the 23rd. July 30th, we're going to be joined by Mk.II, also known as Automatic Gainsay, synth historian extraordinaire. That's going to be a really good one. And then in August, we've got Mark Reeder. September, we've got Mick McNeil again, X of Simple Minds. We've got Axel Hartman, the synth designer. And I'm not going to say anything now, but we're going to have a regular guest, certainly for the rest of the year. Once a month, we're going to have a regular guest. It's somebody you all know and love, but we're just going to finalise the details on that one. So yeah, look forward to that. Watch the announcement. If you want to hear what those announcements are, do join us, please, over on our Facebook page. Just go and search Synth Network. And of course, if you use things like Instagram and Twitter, we're on there as well. Please do come along. And of course, if you want to donate to help us keep the show on the air, that's the address. It's in the link in the description below this video as well.
Hey, just one or two more things here, too.
Sure.
Like, we're almost to 700 subscribers. If 4 people could subscribe, we would appreciate that. Mm-hmm. And also, thank you to Nick Batt, who promoted the show and let everybody know that JJ was going to be on. So really appreciate that.
Big Big shout out to Nick Batt at Sonic State for the promotion. Also, can I just put out there, I saw something today on the Geosynths page that Jamie is stopping doing his live streams because his mum isn't very well. So I just want to send our best wishes to Jamie and to his mum. I hope that isn't anything that's too serious, and all the best to you. And we hope that things get better soon. So we're going to be back same time, same place next week. Thank you ever so much, JJ. Thanks, Chris. Thank you, Ben, as well, and thanks to everybody in the chat room. Please do hit the subscribe button, ring that bell to get the notifications of all of our shows, including the impromptu live streams that we might throw out there. But thank you once again for joining as ever. We are most grateful for your patronage. We will see you same time, same place next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.